Hey guys, tonight we open in the deafening dark of an Athenian silver mine. Child labor, toxic dust, and overseers with whips, somehow threaded into the origin story of democracy and naval glory. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these late-night history journeys travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking down a narrow dirt path under the hot Attic sun. Somewhere behind you, Athens glitters, its white marble temples, its voices shouting in the Agra. But that's not where you're going. You're headed in the opposite direction, past the olive groves and goat paths, toward the far southeast tip of Attica, where the Laurian mines sink deep into the earth like a wound the land never asked for. You've heard of them, of course. Everyone has. They're what paid for the glorious fleet of triremes that defended Greece against Persia. What filled the Athenian treasury. What bought democracy, orators, temples, and theater. But none of that really matters now, because you've got a rough tunic, a chipped pickaxe, and a foreman pointing you toward a dark hole in the hillside with a grunt that basically says, "Get moving." The entrance is unmarked. No grand columns. No sign. Just a slash in the earth, half concealed by scrubby brush, like nature's trying to forget it exists. You step inside and are immediately hit by a wall of cold, stale air that smells faintly of rusted tools, whetstone, and the kind of mold that's definitely not on any Mediterranean diet. The shaft is barely taller than your shoulders and narrow enough that you have to angle sideways to slip in. There's no torch offered, no ladder, just rough steps cut into the slope, slick with centuries of grime. The first few feet are easy enough. You try to breathe through your nose. Bad idea. The dust is thick, metallic. Smells like cold iron and dry bones. Not that you know what dry bones smell like, but somehow, that's the only word your brain gives you. As you step deeper, the light behind you fades. First the bright sun disappears, then the blue glow. Soon, you're relying only on the flicker of an oil lamp someone left hooked to a wall. It casts a twitching, nervous light that seems to shrink every time you move. You duck your head instinctively. The ceiling is lowering. Either that, or you are. Your hands scrape the rough limestone as you follow a crooked path. It's not really a tunnel. It's more like someone scratched their way through the earth and hoped for the best. The walls close in, hugging your shoulders. Every so often, the rock splits into a fork, and you're told, without much explanation, which one to take. You don't ask questions here. Not unless you want the overseer's attention. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets. Not silent. No, there's always sound in the mines. The steady tap-tap-tap of pick on stone. The occasional grunt. A sneeze. The slosh of water being dragged in buckets. But it's not a human quiet. It's something else. Like the earth is breathing around you, slowly, with effort. And then, without warning, the tunnel levels off. It opens, not much, but enough. There are men here, crouched or kneeling, breaking rocks, filling baskets, coughing quietly into their sleeves. One looks up at you. His face is blank, not angry, not curious, just resigned. New? He asks. You nod. He just shrugs. Keep low. Don't stop. Don't drink from the second cistern. Dead goat fell in last week. Encouraging. You drop beside a wall and begin to work. The rock is stubborn and dry. Your pick vibrates painfully in your hand with each strike. There's no silver glittering like treasure here. Just vein after vein of dull gray, which, if you squint, looks a little like old snow melted into stone. You chip and scrape and curse under your breath. Within an hour, your hands feel raw. There's no talking, no timekeeping. The only way to know if your shift is done is when your limbs give out or your basket hits the quota. And even then, someone has to check it. Slowly, with suspicion. Because down here, everyone is guilty until proven useful. Then something stirs in the tunnel behind you. Not a breeze, those don't exist here. It's footsteps. Measured, too clean. You stiffen, the others do too. The overseer arrives without a word. He carries a lamp in one hand and a long switch in the other. His face is half covered by a cloth, probably to keep the dust out, or maybe to avoid catching your gaze. He doesn't need to speak. Everyone just works faster. You do too. Your back aches, but you keep going. The rule is simple. If you're breathing, you're working. Somewhere, you hear a low yelp. A boy, maybe? Someone missed a quota. You're not sure what the punishment is, but you don't want to find out. You press on. Eventually, you're told to switch positions. Go lower. This part is trickier. The tunnel narrows again, and you're forced onto your stomach, crawling now like some insect that's lost its wings. You're behind another miner, a thin man with shaking elbows who whispers, "Watch your head." There's a spot ahead that bites. He's not joking. The ceiling drops without warning, and you bash your scalp, hard enough to see stars in the dark. No one helps. There's no room for sympathy down here. As you crawl, your mind starts to wander, because it has to. You remember the sun, the way the light used to hit the leaves back in the olive grove, the smell of warm bread. You wonder if there's a word in Greek for someone who regrets being born under a democracy funded by hellholes like this. There's no bathroom, no breaks, just the bucket. One shared, one smell. You get used to it, or you pretend to. Historians still debate how many people actually worked in Lorien. Thousands? Tens of thousands? Slaves, mostly. Some free poor citizens desperate for coin. Even children. Some inscriptions hint at ages as young as 7. No one wrote down their names. No one saved their stories. And what about you? You try to imagine what you look like now. Covered in rock dust, bent double, skin scraped, hair damp with sweat. Your fingers are blistered and bleeding. You're not a citizen here. You're a cog in a very old, very loud, very dusty machine. And the machine doesn't know your name. It doesn't care. All you have is this tunnel. This silence. This air that scrapes your throat like broken pottery. And the dull realization that you are here to dig until someone tells you to stop, or until the tunnel collapses. Either way, there's no turning back. The shaft behind you is too narrow to pass the others. You'll be here a while, and the deeper you go, the more you realize this isn't just a mine. It's a grave it hasn't made up its mind yet. You don't really notice how hard it is to breathe until you stop moving. The second your pickaxe pauses, your chest heaves like you've just sprinted uphill, except you haven't. You've barely shifted in place. But the air down here is thick, grainy, and full of something that doesn't belong in lungs. It clings to the walls, floats through the tunnels, settles into your clothes, your eyes, your teeth. It's not just dust. It's powdered stone, ground bone, and centuries of metal-laced earth. You cough quietly. Everyone hears, but no one reacts. The tunnel breathes its own rhythm now. It's like a strange orchestra of suffering. The picks strike in uneven beats, punctuated by the scrape of baskets being hauled toward the surface. Every now and then, someone shifts position, and the rock grumbles beneath them. You start to realize the mine isn't silent. It's never silent. It's just that everything it says is about pressure. You wonder what time it is. There's no clock here, no bell, no sunbeam to track. Time is measured in rocks broken and baskets filled, in bruises, in coughs, in the creaking of joints, in whether your fingers still grip the tool or have gone numb. And yet, the overseer seems to know. He always shows up just before the slowest among you tries to rest. like he can smell laziness or hope. A few men nearby start humming softly, not a song, just a sound to fill the space. A lullaby for grown men digging their own slow exit. You join in, sort of. The sound reverberates oddly in the stone, turning thin voices into something eerie. You imagine it drifting up through cracks, confusing shepherds above, who hear the rocks singing at night. You're sweating now, even though it's cool. Not cold, just damp. The kind of damp that never leaves your bones. It sticks to everything. Your skin itches under your tunic. Your back spasms once hard. You twist slightly and feel the pick slip in your hand. It hits wrong, and the vibration rattles up your arm into your jaw. You bite your tongue. The man next to you winces in sympathy, but doesn't stop working. That's the rule. You don't stop. Not for blood, not for pain. Not unless the wall collapses, and sometimes not even then. You've noticed something strange about the rock here. In places, it almost sparkles. Just a little. A glint here and there. That's the lead and silver ores, packed so tightly, they smear gray onto your hands like war paint. But the dust is the real danger. It floats invisibly, especially when new veins are broken open. Some say you can feel it in your chest right away. Others don't notice until they start coughing up black. There's an old man farther down the tunnel who coughs constantly. You only ever see his back, hunched over a crack in the wall that he's been picking at for what seems like hours. No one speaks to him. His cough is his identity now. A dry, shallow bark that scrapes the silence like a rusty blade. You're told he used to be strong, carried double baskets once. Then the dust got into him. There's no real medical care here. If you collapse, someone drags you out, or not. If your lungs fail, they just stop counting you. Some foremen keep small ledgers, but they're mostly for silver quotas. Not people, not names. Modern archaeologists think some of the ancient miners suffered from chronic silicosis. Basically, their lungs slowly turned into concrete. But no ancient text ever describes it in detail. Too common, maybe. Too depressing. After all, no one wants to hear about the price of Athenian glory. Just the marble. Someone calls out short, sharp. A crack in the wall has widened. A new seam of silver. That means one thing. The pace will now double. You feel the energy shift in the tunnel. Picks strike harder. Shoulders tense. A man slips nearby and curses in Egyptian. You didn't know he was foreign. You didn't know he was here at all. That's another thing. Most of you don't talk much. Not because of fear, but because there's nothing to say. What do you chat about down here? The weather? The dust? Whether or not the cistern water today tastes more like goat or ash. Still, you learn things. You learn the exact weight of a full basket before you ever lift one. You learn which stones are more likely to give way. You learn that if you rub your eyes, the grit cuts worse than salt. And you learn that the worst part of the mine isn't the darkness or the cold, or even the overseer's whip. It's the sound your own heart makes when you realize you've stopped hoping to leave. You wonder, did any of the citizens above ever come here? Ever walk these tunnels, just to see? Some say that once, when Themistocles proposed funding the navy with mining profits, he visited Laurion. Just once. Just long enough to say he'd done it. You imagine him stepping down a few feet, sniffing once, then declaring it productive. Maybe he smiled. Maybe he felt noble. Then he went home and washed off the smell. Historians still wonder just how much Athens depended on Laurion's silver. Some say it was the foundation of the entire empire. Others argue it was just one of many pillars. But here, deep underground, the theory doesn't matter. All you know is that for every coin flipped in the marketplace, someone like you gave a piece of their lungs to mint it. Eventually, your thoughts start to drift, because that's all you have down here. No views, no breeze, just imagination. You picture the sea. You've never seen it, but you've heard sailors talk about how it smells. Like salt and freedom. You try to remember what trees feel like. Real dirt, real sky. But all you get is rock. And dust. And the heartbeat of a mine that's been chewing people up for longer than anyone remembers. And still, you dig. You lose track of how long you've been digging. There's no sun down here, no changing shadows, no difference between morning or night. Just the sound of picks hitting stone and the endless scrape of baskets. Your shoulders ache. Your hands are cracked open like dry soil. You lean back against the tunnel wall for just a second, just to breathe, and that's when you hear it. A sharp clap, followed by silence. Then another. The overseer is coming. It's strange how even the tunnel itself seems to flinch. Conversations, or what little passes for them, stop. Picks grow quieter. Movements sharpen. You straighten up before you even see him, as if your body's been trained by the mine itself. A few heartbeats later, the man appears. Tall lantern in one hand, thin whip in the other. The leather dangles loosely, flicking the floor every few steps like it's tasting the air. He doesn't say a word. He never does. His face is wrapped in cloth from the nose down, supposedly to keep the dust out, but you suspect it's to keep from smelling fear. His eyes, barely visible in the lamplight, scan each miner with mechanical precision. You don't know his name. No one does. The other workers just call him Skia, the Shadow. Not because he disappears, but because he's always there. At your back, in your breath, around every corner. You learned quickly, when the whip hisses, don't look, don't flinch, just work. The whip isn't loud. It's not theatrical. There's no crack like thunder or heroic punishment scene. It whispers. A slick, slicing whisper through the dust-heavy air. It's that quiet kind of violence that doesn't announce itself until it lands. You've already seen what happens to those who move too slow. One man, older than most, dared to lean on his pick for too long. He didn't fall asleep. He didn't abandon his work. He just paused. The whip found him like it always does, fast, unforgiving, and aimed precisely across the shoulder blades. No one cried out. No one protested. He just winced, resumed chipping away, and added one more scar to the others hidden beneath his tunic. There's a rhythm to cruelty here. You recognize it now. The overseer walks at a measured pace, his sandals slapping just offbeat from the miner's tools. When he stops, everyone tightens. When he moves, they breathe. It's a dance with no music and no joy, just obligation. You try not to look, but your eyes drift. The whip he carries is worn smooth at the handle. The tip has a faint glint, maybe from blood, or maybe just the sheen of dust, polished by repetition. You wonder where he learned to use it. Some say these men were once soldiers or guards in the city. Others claim they're criminals, offered the job in exchange for their freedom. Whatever the truth, he belongs more to the mine than to Athens. Even the walls seem to lean away from him. He pauses behind a boy, 12, maybe younger. Too thin. You can see his ribs through his tunic. He's trying his best to hold up a basket of ore, but his knees wobble under the weight. He doesn't see the overseer, but he knows. Everyone knows. The whip doesn't strike. It merely touches the boy's back. Just a whisper of pressure. A reminder. The boy stumbles forward, nearly falls, but catches himself. He moves faster. That's all it takes. You look away. You can't help him. No one can. Not down here. And still, the overseer keeps moving. Later, during the water break, you dare to breathe. Not rest, breathe. You hunch near a cracked amphora filled with gritty, chalky liquid that passes for water. It tastes like limestone and old rope, but you drink it anyway. A man beside you warns, not too much. Makes the belly twist. You nod, as if your belly hasn't already been twisting for hours. The overseer stands nearby, still and silent, watching. He never drinks, never eats. You've never seen him blink. You've started to believe he doesn't need food, just fear and routine, and the whip in his hand. There's a strange calm to him, in the way a storm cloud is calm before the wind. He watches every basket hauled, every man shifting his weight, every cough not stifled fast enough. There's no reward for good behavior, only the absence of punishment. That's as close as anyone gets to mercy here. Historians still debate how harsh mine overseers really were. Some inscriptions describe them as necessary stewards of the people's resources. Others depict them as little more than sadists given permission. One ancient fragment even describes an overseer being chained and thrown into the shaft by the miners themselves. But scholars can't agree if that story is literal or symbolic. Maybe both. You stand, stretch slightly, and return to your position. Not too slow, not too fast. You've learned the pace that keeps him uninterested. That's the goal, not admiration. Not promotion, just to not be noticed. The whip hisses behind you. Not at you, but near. A man yelps, briefly. The sound is swallowed by the tunnel. You don't look. You never look. Hours later, the overseer returns one last time. This time, he doesn't patrol. He just stands in the fork where two tunnels split and says something you don't hear. A few workers are summoned. You watch them walk past you silently, heads down. One glances back at you. His eyes say nothing. Just gone. Some don't return. No one asks why. No announcements. No records. Just fewer voices in the dark. You wonder, who oversees him? Is there someone above? Does he report to the mine owner? A politician? A priest? Or is this just a closed loop of power, where cruelty answers only to quota? The whip, you realize, isn't his real weapon. It's silence. Silence from above. Silence from below. Silence from everyone who has decided this is just the way things work. And so, you return to your post. You lift your tool. And you keep digging. Because here, you're not paid to think. You're not paid at all. You're just here. Until you're not. At first, you think it's a trick of the shadows. A shape too small, too fast, too quiet. But then you hear the sound again. A shuffle, a scrape, and a high, dry cough. Not an echo, not an animal. A child. There are children down here. You just haven't seen them until now, because they move where adults can't. Where adults won't. The tunnel narrows again, and you're told to crawl. No standing, no crouching. Hands and knees. The stone beneath you is sharp and uneven, like a path carved by fingernails and desperation. You slide forward, the ceiling brushing your back. It's barely tall enough to lift your chin. You pass through a crack no wider than your shoulders, and suddenly you're in a crawl space, one that feels more like a tomb than a workplace. And then you see them. 3 boys, maybe 8 or 9 years old, huddled in a narrow chamber. They're not speaking, not playing, just working. One scrapes at a thin vein of ore with a small bronze chisel that looks more like a spoon than a tool. Another uses his hands, fingers blackened from dust and raw at the tips. The third one coughs, a hollow, rasping sound that makes you wince. They don't even look up. One of them shifts slightly, and you realize how tightly they're wedged into this space. It's less than a meter high. They don't walk in here. They slither. They wriggle. They crawl. These aren't tunnels. They're cracks. Cracks in a mountain filled with metal and silence. You whisper, "Are you okay?" And the oldest boy shrugs. "Better than some," he says, and returns to work. It hits you then. This is his world. This narrow passage, this silence, this coughing, it's not strange to him. It's normal, routine, expected. He doesn't know what a school is. He doesn't know what olive trees smell like. His lungs have never breathed clean air. His fingernails have never been free of stone dust. And his childhood, if it ever existed, was swallowed by the mine the moment he could fit through a crevice. No one talks about these children in the city above. When the citizens of Athens praise the prosperity of their great state, they don't mention the boys crawling through silver veins like ants. They talk about democracy, drama, and sculpture, not labor that starts before the voice changes. You keep crawling, carefully. The path winds and dips, sometimes flooding slightly with cold, stagnant water. You pass a boy hauling a tiny basket, his shoulders straining beneath a load too heavy for him, but too light to matter. You wonder how far he has to drag it. You wonder if he'll make it. You wonder if anyone will notice if he doesn't. Historians still argue about how widespread child labor was in ancient Greek mining. Some claim it was rare and overstated. Others suggest that in places like Laurion, it was both common and crucial. Evidence is sparse. There are no detailed logs of worker ages, no surviving testimonies. But fragments of tools, bones, and tunnel dimensions suggest one unsettling truth. Some of these shafts were clearly designed for people no taller than a child. The tunnel opens slightly, and you pause to rest. If rest means not actively dying, then yes, rest. One of the boys beside you shares a tiny fig from a pouch tied around his waist. It's sticky and dry, but sweet. You offer a nod in return, unsure what else to give. You've got nothing, just a pickaxe and too many questions. One of the boys tells you about a friend who got stuck in a tunnel just like this, one that suddenly collapsed inward like a clenched fist. We could still hear him, he says, not looking at you. For a while. You don't ask how long a while means. Instead, you keep moving. The rock presses against your ribs. The air gets thinner. Your muscles scream. Your knees are raw. The ceiling is so low you're practically chewing it. But still, you crawl. Because behind you is the overseer. Ahead of you is the vein. And beside you are the children who were born into this long before you arrived. You reach a deeper chamber where a boy is wedged into a niche face first. He's not moving. You freeze, panicked, but then you hear it. A breath. Slow. Shallow. He's sleeping. Curled into the rock like a fox in a burrow. His chest barely moves. The stone dust on his eyelashes makes him look older. Or dead. You can't tell which. The others ignore him. This is normal. This is survival. You press onward, your joints numb, your breath shallow. The deeper you go, the more the tunnel seems to hum. Not with voices or echoes, but with something stranger. A feeling. Like the walls remember everyone who's ever crawled through here, and are whispering their names in a language made of pressure and heat. You pass a crack in the ceiling, a sliver of light? Maybe, but it disappears as fast as it came. You think about what the boys might dream of, if they still dream. Sunlight? Bread? A tunnel with no walls? Or maybe they don't dream at all. Maybe dreaming is something you lose down here, along with your name, your time, your childhood. You finally reach the end of the crawl space, just a dip in the floor filled with broken stone and little else. No silver. No reward. Just the realization that you'll have to crawl all the way back. But before you do, you sit beside one of the boys, just for a moment. He hands you a piece of charcoal and scratches a little shape on the wall. A bird. You ask why. He shrugs again. In case someone ever finds this place, you take the charcoal. You add a line, a little wing. The two of you say nothing. Then you crawl back into the dark. You crawl back out of the crawl spaces sore, silent, and changed. There's no fresh air waiting for you. No sunrise. Just a slightly wider tunnel with fewer children and a handful of older miners hunched like crooked shadows. The light of the mine hasn't gotten brighter. It's just expanded. A flickering torch. An oil lamp hanging from a bent iron hook. And somewhere farther off, the faint echo of metal and stone, a heartbeat of misery, steady and precise. You take a seat on a flat stone shelf beside a man who might be asleep or just quiet. No one talks here unless they have to. The silence isn't just about exhaustion. It's part of the mind itself. Like it's being enforced, not by the overseer this time, by something older. That's when you realize something strange. There's no shrine down here, no statue, no burnt offerings, no gods, not even a token altar for luck. It's an absence that grows louder the longer you sit with it. Above ground, the divine is unavoidable. Athens is practically tripping over sacred spaces. You can't throw a stone without hitting a shrine to Hermes, a bust of Apollo, or a roadside pillar dripping in melted wax and flower petals. Temples loom over every district. Even olive presses have tiny altars. And before most major decisions, war, marriage, crop harvest, someone asks the gods. But here, nothing. Not a single carved owl, dolphin, or spear. No scratched sigils. Not even a burnt patch of ash that might suggest a ritual once took place. You look around again, trying to make sense of it. Maybe the soot has just covered everything? But no, the walls are clean in the wrong way. Clean like they've never been touched by reverence. The mind might as well be allergic to holiness. The miner beside you opens one eye. He's older, grizzled in the way dust can make a man seem ancient. He notices your searching glance and says, voice like gravel, "You won't find her down here?" "Find who?" you ask. "Athena. No gods below ground." And then he closes his eye again. That's all you get. You try to imagine how that could be. Surely someone must have once tried, left a coin wedged in the rock, whispered a prayer before entering the shaft, scratched a name into the wall, hoping to be remembered by the divine. But the more you search, the more the absence becomes deliberate. Like the mind itself resents the idea of being watched by anything sacred. You remember a rumor told above ground, that Hades himself doesn't walk this deep, that what lies beneath the city is older than Olympus, more stubborn, more quiet, and more indifferent, that the earth accepts suffering as casually as it accepts rain. The gods of the sky might listen, the gods of the sea might negotiate, but the gods of stone? They just endure. One of the boys from earlier passes you in silence, dragging a small basket behind him. He doesn't speak, doesn't acknowledge you. But you notice something. He's humming. It's soft, barely audible, but it's there, a melody that has no words. Ancient, sad, maybe a lullaby, or maybe just something invented to fill the silence. You follow him as far as you can, into a chamber barely larger than a wine cellar. That's where you see it. A circle of rocks, rough, lopsided, primitive. In the center, a cracked oil lamp, a string of olive pits, a tiny clay animal, so misshapen it could be a cat, a pig, or both. And most notably, a single silver coin, tarnished, almost black. You kneel. It's not an altar, not really. It's more like a placeholder, a stand-in for faith. Someone cared enough to make this. Someone who, despite the silence, still needed to believe. You don't touch it. You don't breathe too hard near it. You just watch it flicker in the low light. And something inside you loosens. Further down the tunnel, someone tells you about the room with eyes. A place deeper in the mine where the walls are marked with carvings, hundreds of them, all faces, all staring out. You'll know it when you see it, he says. Feels like being watched by the stone. You think he's joking, until another miner confirms it. They both say it's bad luck to speak in that room. If you do, the ceiling groans. No one knows who carved the faces. Some say escaped laborers used to hide in the mine and left them as warnings. Others claim it's older pre-Athenian even, from before the first shaft, before the city had a name. You ask what happens if you do speak in the room. They don't answer. Instead, Someone else mentions the Whisper Well, a shaft so narrow and deep that if you drop a pebble into it, the echo returns as a whisper. The story goes that if you ask it a question, the well answers. Once, and only once. When you ask if it's real, the man shrugs. You're already living inside a myth, he says. Might as well pick the interesting one. It's hard to know where the superstition ends and the history begins. But in a place this dark, the line blurs. There's a reason the gods stayed above. You feel it now. The deeper you go, the more human rules bend. Time loses meaning. Memory turns to dust. And the divine, if it ever touched this place, has long since recoiled. You reach a chamber where a miner once died. No marker, no name, just a smooth part of the wall where no one dares strike. The tools are laid out nearby, undisturbed. A lamp still hangs, unlit. It's a quiet tomb with no funeral. You wonder how many there are like it. Not forgotten, not remembered, just absorbed. You want to say something. Anything. A prayer, a poem, a joke. But nothing comes out. The air doesn't welcome speech. You close your mouth. Let the silence win. That's what most do. That's what keeps you safe. Eventually, you move on. Quiet again. And as you walk, you pass another charm. This one carved into the wall. A snake biting its tail. A symbol older than reason. Is it protection? A warning? A promise? You'll never know. Because whatever truth lived here is buried. And the gods, if they ever descended into the mines, turned back before reaching this depth. You tighten your grip on your pickaxe. The silence thickens again. And far behind you, the oil lamp on the rough altar flickers, then dies. You don't know how many days it's been. Not really. Down here, a day is just how long your body holds up before the stone gets too heavy or your hands go slack. You might be underground for 10 hours or 20. It all bleeds together in the dark. You sleep in brief, coiled bursts, somewhere between shifts, surrounded by the dull throb of pickaxes and the coughs of men who've been here longer than you can imagine. The worst part is how normal it all feels now. You no longer notice the dust on your teeth, the pain in your back, or the black lines in your fingernails. You don't even feel fear the same way. Not sharp and sudden, but slow, settled, like a second skin. One that fits better than it should. You've stopped looking up when the overseer passes. Stopped flinching at the sound of the whip. Stopped wondering if the boy with the limp ever made it out of the lower shaft. You just work. You're assigned to a deeper tunnel now. No one tells you why. Maybe someone died. Maybe you were too efficient. Maybe it's just your turn. The passage narrows again. The walls pulse with dampness. You descend through a shaft barely wider than your shoulders. The ladder slick with sweat and time. And then you hear it, cracking, somewhere ahead, followed by a low groan, like the mine itself has woken up angry. You freeze. The man behind you mutters a curse. You both hold your breath. The sound stops. Just a shift in the rock, maybe. Just another warning. The mine does that, gives you a single breath of mercy before it decides to take everything. But not today. You press on, crawling into a crooked chamber with half a ceiling and no clear exit. It's not a work area. Not anymore. The tools here are rusted. A broken basket. A lamp with no oil. The smell is different too. Old smoke and something faintly sweet, like dried fruit left to rot. Someone's been here. Or tried to be. And failed. You find a mark on the wall, charcoal, smudged but still visible. A single line, then another. A triangle. A name, maybe. A map. Or just someone's last attempt at being remembered. You sit for a moment. Let your eyes adjust. The silence here is deeper than the rest of the mine. Not dead silence, alive. Buzzing faintly. The kind of quiet that listens. That learns you. You wonder how many died right here. Not dramatically, not crushed, just slowly, forgotten, lost between shifts. One less hand on the basket, one less face in the line, no record, no burial, just stone. The deeper you dig, the more you realize the tunnel has no destination. It winds, it loops. Sometimes it ends in nothing. Sometimes it connects to places that don't make sense, passages that rise without reason or descend into silence. Someone once told you about a shaft that ends in a mirror of water. Not a pool, just water spread thin across flat stone. You can't stand in it. But if you lie down just right, you can see your face. And behind it, nothing, just more dark. Some miners call it the mouth of the mountain. Others say it's a trick. But everyone agrees. If you look too long, you forget why you came. Maybe that's what's happening to you. You barely remember your own name, your hometown, the smell of olive bread, the sound of birds, the way the wind feels on your skin. All of it has been replaced by the scrape of rock, the bite of dust, and the voice in your head that whispers, just one more basket. You crawl into a new shaft. You lift your tool. You strike. The sound echoes down the corridor like a heartbeat. Yours, the mine's. You're not sure anymore. But something's different. The next swing feels lighter, the air less heavy. You strike again, and again, until suddenly the pick breaks through, into a void. Not collapse, just space. You edge forward and blink. Light, not sunlight, torchlight. Controlled, measured, someone's chamber. Not a work tunnel, a storage room, or something older? There's a chest, empty. A nameplate, rusted but legible. You wipe the dust away. One word, Themistocles. You freeze because you've heard that name. Even down here, whispered among the miners. A man who convinced the city to build ships instead of statues. Who used the silver of this very mine to turn Athens into a naval power. Who rose so high he touched the stars, only to be cast down, exiled, and forgotten. And you sit there in the stillness, surrounded by the stones he never dug, and the silence he never heard, and you realize something strange and heavy and true. Everything glorious about Athens began here, in the dark, with hands like yours. And one man, clever, ambitious, hungry for more, took what lay beneath your feet and turned it into a fleet that would challenge empires. Your pickaxe drops to your side. You lean against the rock, breathing shallow and slow, and wonder, did he ever come down here? Did he hear these echoes? Did he know that his name would one day rest beside the bones of the forgotten? The tunnel seems to hold its breath with you, because above ground, a boy named Themistocles is about to change history, and he's going to use the silver you bled for to do it. The first thing you notice is the noise. Athens hums, even before it becomes a superpower. It's not the polished hum of philosophers pacing in marbled courtyards. Not yet. This is the older, scrappier version. The city is louder, closer, dirtier. There's a wild energy to it, like a great idea hasn't quite taken shape yet, but the clay is already spinning on the wheel. The streets are sun-bleached and uneven. Goats wander freely. Fishermen shout over bakers, and someone's always arguing about politics, even if it's just two boys with sticks and big opinions. And somewhere in this mess of cracked walls and clay rooftops, a boy named Themistocles is eavesdropping on everyone. You see him at the edge of the market, crouched near a vendor selling olives. He isn't buying. He's listening, watching how the man weighs the baskets, watching how he sweet-talks the older women and shortchanges the distracted ones. You don't have to ask. He's calculating. Not the olives, the leverage. Themistocles is not what Athens expects. His house is neither poor nor particularly noble. His father, Neocles, is Athenian. Yes, but his mother? Possibly foreign. That makes young Themistocles a bit of an outsider. legally allowed to be a citizen, but socially on the margins. He doesn't come from a long line of statesmen. His family can't trace their bloodline back to the gods. But he doesn't care about bloodlines. He cares about angles. You sit with him on the dirt floor of a modest room, walls uneven and painted only with the stains of smoke. He's whittling something, a shard of pottery, etching a shape into it. You realize it's a trireme, a warship, 3 levels of oars. He hasn't seen one up close yet, but he already knows how many men it takes to move one. He's maybe 9 years old. His eyes don't wander. His fingers never stop moving. He doesn't act like a dreamer. He acts like someone waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Neighbors call him precocious. Some call him arrogant. But most call him dangerous in the way a wildfire is dangerous, not because it's fast, but because it spreads while you're busy watching something else. He isn't popular. Not really. Even as a child, other boys keep their distance. He's clever, but never cruel. Competitive, but not a bully. Still, he's too fast, too direct. He asks questions no one wants to answer. Why does Sparta lead our armies if we're smarter? Why do we trust the rich when they don't trust us? Why do we build temples instead of ships? At one point, he tries formal rhetoric school, but only for a few months. He leaves, unimpressed. He says it's too slow, that the men in togas talk more about virtue than how to win a war. He starts spending time at the docks instead, scribbling trireme measurements onto scraps of parchment. You follow him through his teenage years. He moves like someone with a deadline only he knows about. While his peers are busy preparing speeches for the assembly, he's calculating naval maneuvering patterns in the narrow straits between Salamis and the mainland. No one has asked him to do this. No one's even noticed, but he's already building a navy in his head. There's a story passed down, maybe true, maybe polished with time. They say Themistocles once tried to convince a group of noble boys that Athens should shift all its military investment to naval power. They laughed. He challenged them to a game of strategy, using pebbles and lines scratched in the dirt. He beat every single one of them, then walked away without saying a word. That's how he works. Not with charm, with results. And yet, despite his boldness, he has a curious habit. He doesn't speak much in crowds. Not yet. He watches, absorbs, times things. Then, when he does speak, people listen, not because they like him, but because he's already anticipated what they'll say next. It's unnerving and effective. There's one man who sees his potential early on, Aristides, a rising star himself, known for his fairness and restraint. Aristides is everything Themistocles is not: cautious, measured, respected. Their paths begin to cross. Their rivalry will one day shape the fate of an empire. But for now, they're just 2 bright boys circling each other like rival stars in a sky too small. At home, Themistocles keeps a tiny clay owl, Athena's symbol. He doesn't pray to it. He stares at it, like he's trying to figure out if wisdom is something granted or something taken. It sits by his bed, always watching. His father tells him to be patient. He nods and sneaks out to the shipyards at dawn. The world he's growing up in isn't stable. Athens is on edge. The Persian Empire grows stronger each year. The cities of Ionia, Greek colonies across the Aegean, are beginning to stir. Whispers of rebellion. Whispers of war. Most Athenians aren't paying attention yet. But he is. He always is. And there's another silver discovery in Lorien. The city's mine shafts, those dark, brutal arteries beneath Attica, have struck another rich vein. There's talk of how to spend the profits. Distribute them among the citizens? Build new statues? Repair roads? Themistocles already knows the answer. Triremes. But no one's listening yet. He's still too young. Still too brash. Still too unproven. The city doesn't realize it needs a strategist yet. They still want philosophers and marble. And Themistocles? He's fine with that, for now. Because when the time comes, when the empire does threaten their shores, and the city panics, and the assembly has no idea what to do, he'll already have the plan written. The numbers, the tactics, the escape route, the counterstrike. That's always been the thing with Themistocles. He doesn't wait for permission. He waits for opportunity. And in a city still trying to define its future, he's quietly carving out his own, with the same certainty as a man who already knows how the story ends. By the time Themistocles steps fully into adulthood, Athens is no longer just a city. It's a question. What kind of place does it want to be? What kind of power can it become? It's caught between the proud confidence of past victories and the creeping realization that something larger is coming. You walk beside Themistocles through the dusty streets of the Agora. Vendors call out to passing citizens. Philosophers gather under awnings, arguing over ethics and grain prices. A half-built statue of Apollo towers awkwardly in the sun, scaffolding creaking as masons chip away at the god's toes. Themistocles barely looks at it. His eyes are on the harbor beyond, where ships roll in the wind and the sea glints like a blade. He's been warning anyone who will listen. Persia is not done. The empire across the sea is gathering force. After the Battle of Marathon, Athens celebrated. But Themistocles sees that victory not as the end of a story, but as its beginning. He knows Marathon was a skirmish. The next strike will be a storm. But the city isn't preparing. The assembly debates festivals, trade routes, and whether to extend citizenship to certain skilled workers. The merchants are celebrating a fresh silver strike in the Laurian mines. It's a windfall, they say. The richest vein in years. The talk of the day is how to spend it. Most propose dividing the wealth among the people, a token payment for every citizen. Let the people enjoy the blessing from beneath their feet. Themistocles disagrees. Completely. He sees a different future, one that glides across water, one with oars, one with speed and precision. He's already spent years studying the trireme, Athens' fastest warship. 3 tiers of rowers, narrow hull, deadly bronze ram at the front. A floating weapon, if wielded well. He sees what no one else sees. The future of Athens will not be built in stone. It will be carved into the sea. And so, one morning, he rises to speak at the assembly. You stand among the crowd as his voice cuts through the murmur. No elaborate phrases. No poetic overtures. Just the sharp rhythm of logic. He proposes a radical idea. Use the silver from Laurian not for personal wealth, but for public survival. Build ships, dozens, hundreds. Enough to turn Athens into a naval force that even the Persians would think twice about approaching. The assembly recoils at first. It's not just that he's challenging comfort. He's challenging identity. Athens has always prided itself on its hoplites, citizen soldiers with gleaming shields and familial pride. But Themistocles tells them plainly, swords and spears won't stop the next invasion. Ships will. And whoever controls the waves controls Greece. There are jeers. Of course there are. One landowner shouts that Themistocles wants to turn farmers into fish. Another claims it's madness to abandon tradition for saltwater. But others listen. Because Themistocles isn't asking for imagination, he's offering a plan. A practical, immediate plan, backed by the very earth beneath their feet. And so the assembly votes. Narrowly, but decisively, the silver will not be divided. It will be transformed. Athens becomes a city in motion. A place where the clang of hammers replaces debate, and where shipwrights become as important as priests. You follow Themistocles to the Piraeus, the city's new naval port. It used to be sleepy, a secondary harbor behind Phaleron. Now it pulses with energy. Sawdust lines the pathways. Timber piles stretch toward the sky. Shipbuilders bark orders and argue over design. Themistocles moves through them all, sleeves rolled, not just giving commands but listening. He changes things. quietly, constantly. He recommends a slight curve to the prow, orders wider banks for more oarsmen, asks that decks be reinforced to withstand tighter turning speeds. Small changes, but meaningful. These are not vanity ships. These are weapons. He knows the sea. He's walked its edges, measured its moods. He's memorized the wind patterns that drift through the straits of Salamis and charted which harbors flood at which tide. He doesn't want just a fleet. He wants a fleet that dances. By year's end, Athens has 200 triremes in progress. The city is transforming. Workshops that once made amphorae now cut pegs and nails. Poor citizens are being trained to row. Young men who would never wear bronze armor are learning the cadence of the drum and the pressure of an oar. A new kind of military class is being born, naval, anonymous, fast. And then word arrives. Xerxes is marching west. The storm Themistocles predicted is real. The Persians bring numbers the Greeks can barely comprehend. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps. An army that crosses rivers with floating bridges and darkens the hills with arrows. Cities begin to surrender. Even allies hesitate. Who can stand against that? But Themistocles isn't surprised. He's ready. He joins the Hellenic League, a fragile alliance of Greek city-states. Sparta provides the land commanders. Corinth, the diplomatic caution. But it is Athens, under Themistocles, that brings the strategy and the ships. Themistocles immediately sees that the key to victory isn't in the fields, it's in the water. He pushes for a naval engagement, not in open sea, but in narrow places where numbers mean less and maneuvering means everything. The first clashes come at Artemisium. Themistocles commands the Athenian fleet. It's a test. And though the Greeks suffer losses, they hold their own. The Persians bleed, and they bleed in salt water. When word arrives that Leonidas and his Spartans have fallen at Thermopylae, and the land route is lost, Themistocles does the unthinkable. He tells Athens to evacuate. Burn the bridges, leave the city. The stones can be rebuilt. The people cannot. You walk beside him as he watches the evacuation. The agora is empty. Statues stand guard over quiet streets. Families huddle aboard merchant ships. Even the Acropolis is abandoned. Some curse him, some sob. Others simply stare. Themistocles remains silent, but you can see it in his eyes. He has already chosen the next battleground. Salamis, the narrow strait between the island and the mainland. A place where numbers will bottleneck, where ships cannot move freely, where the Persian advantage will become their trap. He sends messages, decoys, manipulates Xerxes into believing the Greek alliance is fracturing. It's a gamble, but not a guess. Themistocles doesn't gamble, he calculates. And on the day of battle, when the Persian navy crowds into the strait, it's too late. The Greeks strike from coordinated angles. The triremes ram and peel away. Oars whip the sea into white foam. You stand at the shore with him, watching the enemy burn. This is what the Laurian silver bought. Not just a fleet, but the salvation of the city, the survival of an idea. And Themistocles, standing on a rock above the bay, says nothing. He only watches. Because this was always the plan. And now that plan is only just beginning. Dawn rises pale over the straits of Salamis, but the sea doesn't care. It waits, flat and silent, as if holding its breath. You stand beside Themistocles on the rocky slope, overlooking the water. The wind has a briny edge, and somewhere far off, a gull screams like a warning no one understands. This is where it will happen. The battle that could end a city or save a civilization. Athens burned, families displaced, temples empty. But here today, on the water, something greater might be decided. And Themistocles knows it. He has chosen this place on purpose. Salamis is no accident. He knew the Persians would come here, crowding into the narrow straits with their massive fleet, their arrogance, their need to finish what Darius began. But the straits are too tight, too tricky. Speed matters more than size. Precision beats power. And Athens has both, thanks to him. You scan the horizon with him, watching the ships drift into view. First the Persian scouts, then more. Dozens, then hundreds. Painted hulls. Flags you don't recognize. Oars slicing through the morning stillness. They are beautiful, in a terrifying way. Xerxes watches too, seated on a golden throne. He's had a platform built on the slope above the battlefield, raised, shaded, wrapped in tapestries. He intends to enjoy the victory. Perhaps he'll watch Athens crumble from this very chair. Perhaps he'll write about it. Tell his descendants how Greece fell in a single day. But Themistocles knows something Xerxes doesn't. He knows how chaos spreads in a bottleneck. How pride can jam a fleet just as easily as a sandbar. He knows that the Persian numbers won't matter if their ships can't move. The Greek fleet waits, still, silent. Their sails are furled. The triremes bob in rows, neatly spaced like teeth. They don't flinch, don't charge, just wait. That, too, is by design. Every move Themistocles has orchestrated relies on timing. The Persians must commit first. They must believe the Greeks are hesitating, that they are afraid. The oars dip. The enemy advances. It begins quietly, and everything breaks. The first Greek ships lurch forward. Triremes move like arrows, cutting through the straits with brutal purpose. The lead vessels split to either side, forcing the Persians to bunch together. Ramming speed. Contact. Wood cracks like thunder. From the shore, it looks like the sea is shredding itself. Bronze-tipped prows slam into hulls. Oars snap. Men shout in dozens of tongues. Themistocles watches it all, not with glee, but with focus. He doesn't cheer. He studies. He's watching the angles, the speed of turnarounds, the coordination of crews. It's not a battle to him. It's a proof of concept. You squint at the chaos, trying to track who's winning. At first, it's impossible to tell. Then, slowly, the pattern reveals itself. The Persian ships are colliding, not with the enemy, but with each other. They've packed in too tight. Rear vessels can't advance. Flanking ships can't turn. Their numerical advantage has become a liability. One Persian ship veers left, trying to escape the traffic. A Greek trireme meets it head-on. The ram connects, lifting the enemy hull out of the water for a moment before tearing a hole through the midsection. It keels over fast, gone in seconds. You can feel the sound in your chest, timber splintering, bronze crunching, men screaming, sea oiling with wreckage. But Themistocles remains still. He has already moved on to the next moment. Elsewhere on the field, Greek ships execute coordinated pivots. Themistocles taught them these moves himself. He spent weeks on dry land, sketching angles in sand with his staff. He timed how fast each tier of rowers needed to adjust to make a full turn in a space the width of a goat path. And now, in this sea made of knives, they're performing like dancers. You watch a squad of 3 Athenian ships encircle a Persian vessel. It tries to escape. They don't let it. One hits it broadside. The others dart past to catch the next target. It's ruthless, efficient, merciful only in its speed. There's a moment when the Persian flagship tries to rally a charge. It fails. The oars tangle. A following ship crashes into it. Another tries to flank right, only to find a Corinthian wall of hulls already there. They're boxed in, drowning in their own size. From his golden seat, Xerxes begins to realize something is wrong. He doesn't scream. He doesn't cry. He just watches, quietly. But the record keepers at his side begin to write less and look more. You wonder if he understands what's happening. Not the battle, but the shift. That his unstoppable empire is being undone by timing, terrain, and the man standing beside you. Salamis is more than a battle. It's a gamble placed years ago, on silver, on ships, on an idea that a city without kings, without gods of war, without an empire, could still win. Not through brute force, but through vision. By mid-afternoon, the Persian fleet is broken. Some retreat. Others drift, half submerged, burning. The Greeks take losses too, but fewer. They've controlled the pace. Themistocles controlled the game. One historian centuries later will claim that the sea turned red. But you know better. It didn't. The sea remained what it always was. Cold, hungry, unbothered. Themistocles walks the beach as night falls, his boots sinking into the sand, his hands behind his back. He doesn't celebrate. He doesn't raise his arms. He just studies the horizon. He's already thinking about the next threat. Someone asks him how he feels. He answers with a question. How many ships do we have left seaworthy? Because he knows what few others do. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of an entirely new Athens. One that owes its survival not to temples or traditions, but to the sea and the man who saw what it could offer. The Greek world will talk about this battle for centuries. They will sculpt it into marble, write it in verse, and recite it in public squares long after the blood has dried. But only a handful will ever truly understand what happened here. That history was bent not by heroism, but by calculation. That a mined silver became a navy. That a navy became a victory. And that a victory became the first breath of an empire made not of conquest, but of culture. And at the center of it all is a man who knew how to turn disaster into design. Tonight, he stands alone at the water's edge, while smoke from the Persian ships drifts westward. And somewhere far inland, Xerxes rides home to Persia, his golden throne packed away, his dreams of conquest folded into silence. You return to Athens alongside Themistocles, expecting music, maybe a statue or two, or at least a decent lunch. But there's none of that. Just dust, burnt wood, a city trying to look grateful, but not quite pulling it off. Themistocles has saved them all, or rather, helped them save themselves. But you can already tell the mood is shifting, not in grand gestures, in glances, in carefully neutral greetings, in the silence that follows whenever he enters a room. Victory, it turns out, is a delicate thing, especially in Athens. Especially when you're the man who made it happen. Themistocles doesn't seem to mind. Not yet. He strides through the agora with the same upright posture, still wrapped in the purple-edged cloak gifted to him after Salamis. He walks like someone who's not just seen the gods, but given them advice. But Athens, rebuilt or not, is still Athens. And Athens doesn't do thrones. He's never called himself a king. He's never needed to. His ideas, his influence, his decisions, all have carried the weight of royalty without ever breaking the letter of democracy. And that, in a city of equals, makes him dangerous. You accompany him through meetings at the Knicks, where the assembly gathers. He's trying to finish what he started, proposing new naval expansions, a permanent fortification of the Piraeus port, walls strong enough to withstand another Persian tide. The proposals are solid, smart, but the votes are closer than they used to be. It's not the arguments that have changed. It's the appetite for them. Athens is tired of fear, of war, of urgency. Themistocles' tone, once inspiring, now feels to some like shouting after the danger has passed. You hear the whispers in the baths, the symposiums, the side streets, arrogant, drunk on power, still writing letters to Persian cities. Did you hear that? You glance at Themistocles, wondering if he hears it too. Of course he does. But he doesn't slow down. Instead, he pushes further. He knows Athens is at a crossroads. Persia might be licking its wounds, but it's not dead. Sparta is growing uneasy. The Greek world is shifting. This is the moment, he insists. The moment to strengthen the city for the next century. Themistocles backs the building of the Long Walls, a brilliant and controversial move. A pair of massive fortifications to connect Athens to its harbor at Piraeus, allowing supplies to flow in even during siege. He argues it's vital. His opponents claim it's provocation. You can see their faces. Proud landowners from the interior, wary of naval dominance, and even more wary of the man proposing it. Then Sparta objects, loudly. They say the walls are a threat to unity among the Greek city-states. They want the construction paused, reviewed, negotiated. In secret, they send envoys to persuade Athens to stop. Themistocles smiles, says he'll travel to Sparta personally, assure them everything is just fine. What he doesn't say, what you learn only afterward, is that he's already instructed Athens to keep building. Fast, quietly, day and night. Bricks are laid under moonlight. Laborers and citizens alike carry stones. No rest until they rise. He delays the talks in Sparta. He flatters. He nods. He buys time. When the Spartans finally get word that the walls are nearly complete, there's nothing they can do. It's over. Athens is now not just a city with ships, but a fortress. And for a moment, Themistocles shines again. People toast his cleverness. The streets hum with pride. He's done the impossible. Outwitted Sparta, rebuilt a broken city, secured its future. But moments don't last. His rivals regroup. Cimon, the son of Miltiades, returns from his own military successes with a cleaner smile and more palatable manners. He flatters the assembly, donates lavishly to public projects, and speaks of Sparta with affection, which the upper classes find very refreshing. You see the tide turn not all at once, but gradually. A postponed invitation here, a missing vote there. Themistocles still commands respect, but not warmth. And in Athens, respect alone isn't enough. There are accusations now, quiet ones, but persistent, that he speaks too freely with Persian cities, that he's too interested in his own glory, that he dreams of ruling, not serving. One day, a man you've never seen before spits as Themistocles passes by. Another offers only a stiff nod where once there was applause. You see it in his eyes. He notices. Of course he does. But he says nothing. He's calculating again. Always calculating. Still, he continues to serve. He argues for strategic positioning in the new Delian League. He suggests alliances the assembly finds too bold. He drafts trade proposals with cities far outside Greek borders. His mind keeps moving at a speed the city no longer matches. The final blow doesn't come from Athens. It comes from Sparta. A conspiracy. A vague charge of treason. Not entirely believable, but enough to stir the water. Themistocles is implicated in a plot he likely had nothing to do with, but enough people believe he could have. That's all it takes. You follow him to his trial, where he stands alone in the center of the stone theater, his cloak weathered, his sandals dusty. He speaks clearly, calmly. Even now, he never begs. He reasons, he reminds, he explains. The assembly listens, and then ostracizes him anyway. It's stunning, but not shocking. The man who turned silver into ships, who bent the sea to Athens' will, who spoke with fire and logic until even kings took notice, has become too large, too strange, too uncomfortable. And Athens, for all its brilliance, does not love what it cannot control. You leave the city beside him, your footsteps echoing against the marble streets. No crowd follows. No one stops to watch. Only the quiet hum of hammers rebuilding the very walls he made possible. He does not curse the city. He does not cry. He simply walks on, toward exile, toward a horizon not yet defined. And though you cannot see it now, history will remember. The man it exiled will become a legend, a lesson, a question with no easy answer. You walk beside Themistocles, now not as a celebrated strategist, but as a man slipping through the cracks of memory. There's no ceremony to exile. No guards, no chains, no official proclamation. Just the quiet agreement that it's better if he leaves. The same people who once carved his name into stone now whisper it like an uncomfortable rumor. He doesn't speak much as you pass the borders of Attica, but he doesn't hang his head either. There's no self-pity in his stride. He moves like someone beginning a new project, not ending a career. With each town passed and each pair of staring eyes ignored, he studies the road like he's memorizing it, plotting, filing it away. At first, he lingers in friendly territories, Argos, Thessaly, maybe even Epirus. Small cities where the name Themistocles still draws cautious admiration. You sleep in borrowed rooms above stables. He talks to fishermen, traders, old generals. But these are shallow waters. He's restless. The conversations are limited, the prospects even more so. And soon, even those who once toasted him become politely distant. His presence is inconvenient, his reputation too large. And then something strange happens. A letter arrives, carried by a man who doesn't speak Greek very well. A message from across the sea. From Persia. You hold the wax seal in your hand, still warm from the messenger's grip. The writing is clean, elegant, unreadable, but Themistocles reads it easily. He doesn't look surprised. He nods once, folds the parchment carefully, and says, "We leave in the morning." It's from Artaxerxes I, newly crowned king of kings. The son of Xerxes, the very man whose navy Themistocles shattered at Salamis. The message is simple. Come to the Persian court. There will be no harm. There is something the king wishes to discuss. You're stunned. But Themistocles? He seems almost intrigued. You ask if he's really going. He doesn't answer directly. Just smiles a little and says, "Even a lion must sometimes drink from strange rivers. You travel by boat across the Aegean. The wind is calm, the water dark. You pass the coastline of Asia Minor and sail into territory that only a few years ago was considered the enemy. You expect tension, you find welcome. At Ephesus, Persian riders are waiting. They guide you inland, through the Lydia region, toward Sardis, or maybe Susa, it's hard to tell. The names blur in the dust of the road. What you remember most are the sights, the scale of things, the size of the roads, the way the palaces seem to lean forward into the sunlight. Persia doesn't move like Greece. It flows, wide and smooth. And Themistocles begins to change, not abruptly, not visibly, but his posture shifts, his words slow, his clothes grow softer. He learns Persian fast, faster than the scribes expect. He studies the customs, eats with both hands, nods instead of bowing, as if deep down, part of him always knew he'd end up here, not fleeing, just migrating. The court of Artaxerxes receives him not with suspicion, but ceremony. You're brought through gardens, past blue-tiled courtyards, into a room that smells like cinnamon and old stone. Artaxerxes is young, measured. He greets Themistocles as if welcoming a guest, not an enemy. They speak privately, and for a long time, no one is allowed to hear. But when Themistocles emerges, his eyes are sharper than they've been in years. You ask what was said? He shrugs. Just introductions, for now. Soon after, he's granted land. A house, a title, though it's vague. Something like advisor or strategist, but not one used openly in Persian politics. They send him to Magnesia on the Meander, a prosperous town near the river. It's not exile. It's a reward. And it comes with revenue, servants, even temples built in his name. You walk the streets of Magnesia with him. Themistocles greets farmers, oversees repairs, visits shrines. He hosts banquets for regional officials and reads Persian chronicles at night. He no longer talks of Athens unless prompted. And even then, his words are gentle, wistful but never bitter. One day, as you sit with him beneath the shade of fig trees, he says, Athens taught me everything, but Persia taught me how long history really is. Here's the mystery. Did he ever betray Greece? Did he feed Artaxerxes' secrets? Strategies? Weaknesses? No one knows. Not really. Some ancient writers suggest he agreed to assist Persia in a future campaign against Greece. Others insist he stalled the king's plans until the very end. One claims Themistocles promised help and then died before delivering. Another suggests he deliberately poisoned himself when the request finally came. What's undeniable is that Persia trusted him, and that he stayed. There are moments in Magnesia when you almost forget what he once was. You see him supervising irrigation canals, debating the price of goats, laughing at court jokes in a language he didn't know 2 years earlier. But then he'll pause by the river at dusk, staring eastward. Or westward, it's hard to tell. And in his silence, you glimpse the man who once steered Athens through fire and salt water. The man who turned silver into ships, walls into weapons, fear into future. It's easy to call this a fall, but you start to realize maybe it isn't. Maybe Themistocles didn't fall from greatness. Maybe he simply moved sideways into a different kind of history, one not written by Athenians, but remembered all the same. The Persians call him a wise man, the Greeks a traitor. The truth, as always, lives in the space between. And here, in the wide quiet of Magnesia, he lives out the last years of his life as something stranger than exile and greater than a citizen. He becomes a figure without a country, a mind without a border. And as the olive trees sway in the Anatolian breeze, and the Meander River coils like a silver thread beyond the city walls, you wonder how many others have shaped the world only to watch it forget them. You walk slowly along the banks of the Meander River, the water curling like silver thread past the edges of Magnesia. Themistocles used to walk here too. Not often, but regularly. You remember how he always paused at the same spot, just as the reeds parted and the temple domes became visible in the distance. He said it reminded him of the long view from the Piraeus. He never said more than that, but his face always grew quiet there, as if that view pulled at something older than memory. The grave is small, modest, the kind of resting place that almost vanishes if you don't know where to look. A low stone marker, worn by rain, covered in faint lichen. No inscription, no official decree, no triumphant epitaph carved in heroic meter. Just one stone among many, nestled in soft soil, shaded by fig trees that have probably outlived their planter. But you know who lies beneath it. It's strange standing here. Not because he's gone. You expected that. But because there's no sense of finality. Themistocles always felt like a man in motion. Even in exile. Even in silence. Even here. He didn't fade into obscurity. He slipped sideways, as if ducking into a side alley of history no one else noticed. The official accounts vary. Some say he died from illness. Fever, perhaps. Caught one spring when the river ran too high. Others whisper that he took poison, fulfilling some forgotten promise to Artaxerxes. That when Persia finally asked him to lead troops against Greece, he made the only move left that let him keep control. And then there are the romantic versions. That he climbed the hills above Magnesia, watched the stars one last time, and simply stopped. No pain, no warning. Just a quiet retreat from the world. What's certain is that Athens wasn't watching. No delegation came to collect his bones. No theater competition was dedicated in his name. And Sparta, of course, didn't speak of him at all. He disappeared from the city-states like a shadow at noon, suddenly, with no time to point before he was gone. Magnesia, though, remembers, not loudly, but with the kind of local folklore that lingers in street corners and market stalls. Some still refer to a stretch of road near the river as the Greeks walk. An old woman, peeling almonds at a vendor's cart, swears her grandfather told stories about a foreign lord who judged land disputes with perfect fairness. A temple outside town bears an odd architectural blend, Greek columns, Persian reliefs, and the priests insist it was funded by an exile with two languages in his mouth and one god in his eyes. No one says his name, but everyone knows who it is. He governed here for years, not as a tyrant, not as a puppet, just as a man who knew how to listen before speaking. He repaired aqueducts, opened trade routes, encouraged music, introduced new coin designs that caught on even in neighboring towns. Themistocles, who once commanded fleets with a tilt of his chin, ended up measuring grain yields and setting property lines. And somehow, you suspect, he didn't mind. Still, you remember the way he stared at the horizon during the quietest moments. Not longing for Athens, exactly, but for relevance. For the feeling of being inside the story, instead of watching it pass by. He never said it aloud, but you felt it in the way he folded his maps. How his fingers traced coastlines he would never sail again. How he kept his armor polished, even though he hadn't worn it in years. One morning, he simply didn't come down from his quarters. The servants waited, the officials whispered, and when they found him, eyes closed, hands folded across his chest, there was no expression of fear, just rest, the kind that takes years to earn. They wrapped his body in soft linens. The locals built the grave with their own hands. He lies here still, far from the assembly, far from the salt spray of Salamis, far from the city that once chanted his name with thunderous applause before turning its back. And maybe that's what makes this ending strange. Not the place, but the peace. After years of rivalry, strategy, and suspicion, this is where his story ends. No scandal, no betrayal, just silence. You wonder if he expected anyone to visit. If he imagined a time when some wandering listener would stand at his grave and feel something other than pity. A time like now. And yet, for all the layers of dust and decades, he's not forgotten. In fact, there's something quietly remarkable about how often his name reappears. Not shouted from temples, but whispered between scholars. Tucked into footnotes. Painted into fading frescoes in places as far apart as Sicily and Persepolis. Themistocles never built an empire, but somehow he became a part of everyone else's. There's one story, likely apocryphal, but hard to dismiss, that centuries after his death, a merchant from Athens passed through Magnesia. He spoke no Persian, knew nothing of the town's history, but he paused at the riverbank one evening and said the wind smelled like home. He camped near the grave without realizing what lay beneath it. And that night, he dreamed of a man in bronze armor, asking for news of the sea. Whether that was memory or myth, no one can say. But it feels right, because Themistocles was never content with being rooted. Even now, you suspect, the river carries his legacy downstream in fragments. Strategies tucked into eddies, whispers echoing beneath the stones. You take one last look at the grave. There's no name carved into the stone, but there doesn't need to be. The story carved itself into the coastlines long ago. And now, your path turns once again. You leave the grave behind and begin a new climb, not through politics or empire, but through mystery. The air grows thinner. The road winds higher. You're heading inland now, toward Mount Parnassus, where the cliffs open into a sanctuary of strange echoes and cryptic breath. Delphi, the sacred heart of Greece. A place older than strategy, untouched by empires, yet sought by them all. Here, answers come in riddles. Kings wait in line behind farmers. And the most powerful voice in the Greek world belongs to a woman seated above a chasm, breathing in secrets from the earth itself. If Themistocles built his future with ships and silver, the next chapter will be carved in smoke and shadow. The path is narrow now. The mountain wind hums like a distant lyre string. The stones underfoot are older than history. Keep going. The oracle is waiting. You leave the grave behind, the fig trees swaying faintly as the breeze shifts. The river bends out of sight. The dust of magnesia settles. And now, the path draws you inland, through hills that grow steeper, stranger, older. You travel light. Themistocles' silence still clings to your thoughts, but the air here is thinner, crisper, and your steps start to slow for other reasons. The road climbs, and so do you. Your feet trace worn stone paths that have carried pilgrims for centuries. The trees change as you ascend, first olive, then laurel, then pine. The air cools, takes on the scent of resin and rock. And somewhere far ahead, the cliffs of Mount Parnassus rise like ancient shoulders hunched beneath the sky. The horizon seems to tilt backward. The mountain isn't tall in the dramatic, snow-capped way. It's tall in the way that makes you feel like you're being watched by the earth itself. You don't know exactly when you cross the threshold into sacred land. There's no gate, no announcement, just a hush that grows thicker with every step. The sky presses down, the birds go quiet, and the stones beneath your feet begin to whisper, not in words, but in presence. You're entering Delphi. It's not a city. It's a question carved into a mountain, one that doesn't expect answers, just honesty. Nestled in the cliffs, surrounded by jagged rock and wind-worn terraces, the sanctuary waits. Buildings peek from behind cypress groves, temples, treasuries, a theater cut into the hillside. But everything here seems built to defer to something deeper. This is not a place of power. It's a place of surrender. Can you feel that? Not fear. Just the strange weight of being somewhere you don't fully understand. They say this is the Omphalos, the navel of the world. The place where Zeus's two eagles, released from opposite ends of the earth, met at the center. A symbolic bullseye on the earth's body. One priest claimed he could feel the heartbeat of the gods if he pressed his palm against the rock at dawn. That may have been metaphor, or indigestion, or both. But still, the story stuck. As you approach the sanctuary, the path winds tighter. You pass the Castalian spring, its water so clear, it looks like it hasn't learned how to reflect. Pilgrims once bathed here, before approaching the oracle. Priests washed sacred objects. Even today, the stones near the water are worn smooth by centuries of feet. You pause, dip your fingers in. It's cold, clean, sharp. The kind of cold that stays in your skin longer than it should, like a whisper pressed into your palm. You continue upward, past monuments left by city-states, hoping to win the gods' favor. Corinth offered bronze bulls. Thebes sent gold. Athens built a treasury shaped like a miniature temple, every surface carved with scenes of myth and battle. Even Sparta left something, simple, sturdy, unadorned. A block of stone with an offering bowl still attached. The Spartans didn't like frills, but they did believe in omens. But all of these were gifts. Bribes, really. Payments in advance for answers no one could guarantee. Because everyone who came to Delphi wanted something. Victory, guidance, approval, absolution. And only one voice could give it. You start to notice how many of these offerings were left by men who didn't live long after. The road to Delphi was well traveled by those nearing the end of something, even if they didn't know it yet. The path brings you to the Temple of Apollo, pale stone rising from the slope like a rib cage. Parts of the roof are long gone. Vines thread through the cracks, but it still holds its shape, still demands stillness. You stand at the entrance for a moment. The wind slows. The sound of your own breath becomes the loudest thing around you. You step inside. The temperature drops. Not cold, exactly, just cooler than it should be. The stone breathes almost. You imagine incense here once, thick with burned laurel, torches flickering. A hush so complete that even sandals stop squeaking. The floor slopes inward, drawing you toward the center like a drain for thoughts. And in the center, the tripod. The Pythia sat there, The oracle, a woman chosen by the priests of Apollo, trained and prepared to become something more than herself. She fasted, she prayed, she bathed in the Castalian spring. Then, at the appointed time, she descended into the Adyton, the innermost chamber, where the earth opened and the vapors rose. Some say she sat above a crack in the rock. Others say it was a bronze grate that released a faint, sweet gas. Whatever it was, it changed the way she spoke. They say she swayed gently at first, as if rocked by a wind no one else could feel. Her fingers clutched a sprig of laurel. Her mouth moved slowly. Then the words came, sometimes slurred, sometimes fast, sometimes as slow as honey sliding off a knife. The priests nearby would lean in to catch the rhythms, and write them down and smooth them into verses. She didn't answer questions. She created more. One general once asked if he should attack a neighboring polis. The oracle replied, "A great victory will come if war is waged." Encouraging, right? Except the neighboring city had also asked the same question and received the same reply. Both sides marched forward, both expecting glory, and only one returned. You wonder what it must have felt like to be the Pythia, to have every word weighed, parsed, rephrased, to be treated as a vessel, not a voice, chosen, revered, and isolated all at once. Did she feel the god enter her? Or did she simply play the part until the part became her? Later Roman writers described her raving, foaming, thrashing. But these accounts read more like horror theater than history. The earlier Greek sources speak of serenity, that she was calm, that she didn't shout, she listened, that her trance wasn't madness, but something closer to profound quiet, like the silence just before a snowfall. And what about the gas? That mystery still endures? In the 1990s, geologists found evidence of fault lines beneath the site, faults that could release light hydrocarbons like ethylene. In low doses, ethylene causes dizziness, euphoria, even mild hallucinations. Enough to make the world shift slightly sideways. Not enough to collapse, just enough to open a door. But the full ritual remains hidden. No chamber has been preserved. No scroll describes the exact timing, the quantity, the preparation. It may have been 100 little things. Laurel oil, the darkness, the pressure of belief, or something we've forgotten entirely. You sit on the steps, legs folded beneath you, and let your mind wander. Themistocles stood here once before Salamis. The oracle told him Athens would fall, that only a wooden wall would save it. The city panicked. But Themistocles saw meaning in the phrase. He said the ships were the wooden wall. And he was right. Unless he wasn't. Unless he made the meaning fit after the fact. Maybe that's what Delphi is for. People who need their instincts blessed with a little mystery. You stand and look out over the valley. It stretches endlessly, ridges soft with olive groves, the sea just a haze at the horizon. You can almost hear the sound of voices rising from long ago, prayers, songs, debates. So many languages, so many faces, all coming here for the same reason, not to be told what to do, but to be given a shape for their uncertainty. Somewhere below, a bird calls once, then falls silent. You breathe in the high, dry air, tinged with laurel, and listen for echoes that may never come. The sun begins to lower. Shadows stretch across the stones. The silence doesn't scare you anymore. It fits. Whatever happens next, you're already inside the question. You stay near the temple a little longer, close enough that you can almost feel the stone cooling in the shade. The space where the Pythia once sat is empty now, just quiet rock and imagination, but your mind can't help filling in the details. You picture her feet bare against the flagstone, her fingers curled lightly around a branch of laurel, the faint sound of her breathing slow, careful, almost rehearsed. They called her the mouthpiece of Apollo, but she had a name before that. Several, in fact. The Pythia wasn't just one woman. She was a role passed down through generations, a position held only by those deemed pure enough, wise enough, devoted enough to channel the voice of a god. Some say the first priestess came from the old cult of Gaia, the earth goddess, that she once spoke not for Apollo, but for the earth itself. You descend a little farther into what would have been the Adyton, the sacred chamber beneath the temple, off limits to visitors. The air thickens slightly, though it's more psychological than physical. No more fumes rise from the floor, but you can imagine how it might have felt when they did. The walls are close here, heavy with silence. Light doesn't quite reach the corners. The Pythia would sit on a three-legged bronze tripod, placed directly above a fissure in the rock, or so the stories go. Some accounts claim that vapor drifted up from the ground, a sweet, narcotic scent that sent her into a trance. Others believe it was the heat, the darkness, the pressure of ritual that created the altered state. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe she believed it, and that belief was the strongest drug of all. And then she would begin. At first, slowly, murmurs, syllables, phrases that didn't quite fit together. Her voice might tremble or stretch, but it didn't crack. There was rhythm to it, even beauty. Sometimes the priests nearby would lean in to hear. They had their tablets ready, their wax styluses warmed. Her words were their currency, and they were careful not to drop a single drachma of it. That's where the translation began, not just of language, but of intent. Her utterances, raw and opaque, were reshaped by those listening into something that could be taken home and obeyed. Some say that Pythia spoke in complete hexameter verse, perfect lines of poetic prophecy. Others say she only muttered, and it was the priests who turned those fragments into meaning. Which is truer, that she was a poet possessed, or a voice rearranged by others into what they wanted to hear? The chamber wasn't much to look at. No grand altar, no throne, just stone and shadow. But those shadows once held the attention of kings. They waited outside, pacing, sweating, clutching bronze offerings. Entire empires hung on what was happening in this low, echoing cave. You stand here now, and it's hard to imagine that much power condensed into such a small, windowless room. You begin to understand the theater of it all. The waiting, the mystery, the way the Pythia's chamber was half seen, her voice never fully hers. No one ever really made eye contact with the oracle. She was too sacred for that, or maybe too human. And yet, there were moments documented, preserved, where the trance deepened into something beyond performance. One Pythia reportedly collapsed mid-ritual, tears running down her cheeks, unable to speak at all. Another once screamed so loudly that the laurel wreath on the temple gate split down the middle. Fabrication? Drama? Or glimpses of something stranger? The sacred laurel was central to it all. Apollo's tree, a symbol of clarity, of purification. The Pythia would chew the leaves before taking her seat, or sometimes burn them. Their scent filled the chamber, sharp and resinous, enough to clear the sinuses and cloud the mind. Some modern botanists believe laurel may have mild psychoactive properties, especially when burned in enclosed spaces. Combined with the gases from the fissure, the effect may have been enough to push the mind into a suggestive, floaty state, neither asleep nor awake. One lesser-known practice? The priests sometimes released doves before a prophecy session, not because the birds were sacred, but because their behavior served as a kind of weather gauge. If the doves flew oddly or circled back, it might mean gas levels were unusually high. It sounds almost absurd, using bird behavior to divine the safety of prophecy. But in a place like Delphi, even absurdity feels sacred. You picture a session unfolding. The chamber is half lit by flickering torches. A laurel smoke curls in the air. The Pythia breathes deeply and more slowly. Her fingers twitch. Her head dips. A priest steps closer, listening. Outside, the supplicant waits. A general, perhaps, wondering if his campaign will bring glory or ruin. He doesn't know that inside, the oracle is swaying now, whispering in fragmented verse. The eagle flies, but not forever. The sea drinks fire. Beware the second moon. The priest writes it down quickly. Later, he'll shape it into something useful. He'll tell the general, Apollo warns of betrayal near the sea. Act swiftly. And the general will nod, convinced. He'll tell his soldiers, his advisors. They'll tell their families. And a single sentence spoken in shadow will ripple through entire cities. Was the Pythia aware of that power? Some scholars think she had no memory afterward, that the trance blanked her entirely. Others suggest she played her role with careful intention, fully conscious beneath the ritual. That she learned how to speak in riddles, not because she was inspired, but because she was trained. Maybe she walked home afterward, clutching her sandals, smiling to herself at how perfectly ambiguous she'd been that day. You look up. The roof here is broken now, sunlight sneaking in through the cracks. But you can still feel it, the weight of the voices, the heavy silence between answers. You're alone, but you're not. Something of her is still here. Not a ghost, just a kind of echo. You wonder how many women passed through this chamber across the centuries. 50? 100? More? Most of their names are lost. But each sat here, each breathed in this space. Each spoke words they maybe didn't fully understand. And what of the questions they were asked? Some were desperate. Should I marry him? Will the crops fail? Will my son come home? Others were enormous. Should we declare war? Will the gods bless our expansion? What lies beyond the sea? The oracle did not offer comfort. Only shape, only suggestion, only mystery. One prophecy survives that makes you pause. A wealthy merchant came asking about his ships, hoping for a good trade season. The Pythia answered, the fat will float, the lean will sink. Choose your cargo. It's hard to tell if that's divine wisdom or just solid advice on ballast. But the merchant made a fortune. Outside, the day continues without you. The wind slides between the columns. The dust swirls in lazy spirals. But here, in this strange, sacred hollow beneath Apollo's temple, you've touched a kind of stillness that doesn't come from silence, but from story. And story, you realize, is what people really came here for. Not prophecy, not instruction, just a shape to carry home. A truth that could be repeated, embroidered, and remembered. You stand slowly, joints stiff from the stone. One last glance at the place where the tripod stood. The air smells faintly of dry earth and something older. Something that might be memory, or just time. You step outside. The sun slants lower as you make your way down from the temple, casting long shadows that stretch across the sacred way. This path once wound between dozens of offerings and monuments, gleaming with bronze and marble tributes, now mostly gone, worn down or looted. But the ghost of grandeur still lingers. You can almost hear it. The creak of sandal straps on limestone, the murmured prayers of men with too much ambition and not enough certainty. Delphi didn't just draw wanderers and pilgrims. It attracted power. Kings, generals, tyrants, and philosophers alike. All of them came here eventually, not always in person. Some sent envoys bearing gifts, veiled threats, and long lists of carefully phrased questions. Others marched up the mountainside themselves, bristling with authority, but speaking in hushed tones once inside the sanctuary walls. Because here, no matter who you were back home, you stood as a petitioner, a seeker, a client of a god. Croesus of Lydia was one of the most famous. A king so wealthy his name still means unfathomably rich. He didn't just bring a gift, he brought an avalanche. Gold bowls, lion statues, massive ingots, even a throne. All glittering offerings to Apollo, stacked high in the treasuries like a royal flex. But Croesus was playing a deeper game. He wanted confirmation. He planned to attack Persia and wanted to know whether he'd succeed. The oracle answered with classic ambiguity. If you cross the river, a great empire will fall. Croesus took that as encouragement. He crossed the river. A great empire did fall, but it was his own. The Persians crushed him. And somewhere in Delphi, a priest probably nodded with the quiet satisfaction of technical correctness. The oracle never lied, but she never gave you certainty either. As you walk along the sacred way, you start to see why. Imagine if she had answered directly. If she'd said, "Don't do it, Croesus. Persia will wipe the floor with you." What happens next? Croesus would either laugh her off, or worse, punish Delphi for daring to oppose his plans. But give him a sentence that sounds profound, that's flexible enough to mean whatever he wants it to mean, and suddenly, she's off the hook. The gods speak truth, but only the kind of truth that's immune to consequences. And that, in itself, was part of her power. You stop beside one of the remaining treasuries. It's a small building, built like a miniature temple, once packed with offerings from the Athenians after their victory at Marathon. Even now, the marble holds some of its sheen. You try to imagine it filled with bronze shields, statues, jars of oil, chests of coin. The kind of loot that could fund a small polis or bribe a very large god. Almost every city-state tried to outdo the others. Corinth brought horses cast in gold. Naxos built a colossal sphinx atop a twisting Ionic column. The Spartans, ever minimal, gave simple dedications in rough stone. And then there were kings from far beyond Greece, Egyptian pharaohs, Libyan warlords, even early Roman envoys. Delphi was international, long before that word existed. The oracle didn't care where you came from, only that you listened. There's something a little ironic about it. These powerful men, used to giving orders and taking land, reduced to lining up for a cryptic poem from a woman in a smoky room. And they believed in it. Or at least, they respected it enough to pretend. One of the more bizarre offerings ever brought here. A suit of golden armor made for a horse. Not the rider, the horse, encrusted with sapphires. Legend says it came from a Thracian king who asked if his stallion would survive battle. The oracle told him, "The beast will carry no burden after the red sun." The king withdrew the horse from the campaign. It died peacefully a year later in its stable. Not bad, as prophecies go. A bit theatrical. You pass what's left of the monument to the Argives, fellow Greeks who commemorated their own version of triumph, with a towering column and statues of heroes from the Trojan War. You wonder if those statues had the same kind of glint Croesus's bowls did, or if they were mostly for show. Probably both. Faith and status are often difficult to untangle. A question rises that no one seems able to answer. Did the oracle actually influence decisions, or just reflect them? Was she shaping history, or simply dressing it in verse? Take Themistocles, for example. His visit to Delphi before the Battle of Salamis is legendary. The oracle told the Athenians their city would burn, that only a wooden wall would save them. Most citizens panicked, assumed it meant to build fortifications. But Themistocles interpreted it as a reference to ships. He convinced the city to evacuate and fight at sea. It worked. The Persian fleet was defeated. The oracle was vindicated. But had she predicted it? Or did Themistocles make her words fit a strategy he already believed in? You round a corner where a once grand column now lies cracked and horizontal. Birds have built nests in its hollow drum. A lizard sprints across the stone, like it has somewhere important to be. You follow the lizard with your eyes, then glance back toward the temple. The column once supported a statue of a victorious general, now gone, like the war he won, the name he carved, the country he served. Delphi has seen too many kings to remember them all. And not all came seeking advice. Some came seeking legitimacy, endorsement. There's power in being seen as blessed by Apollo, especially when you rule a fractious city full of suspicious citizens. A prophecy, even a vague one, could silence opposition better than any sword. The god said it. End of discussion. And the oracle obliged, sometimes. There are stories of bought prophecies, of priests subtly influenced by bribes or flattery. Not necessarily falsified messages, but edited ones. When Sparta considered invading Athens during a festival, the oracle just happened to declare that doing so would displease the gods. Convenient, maybe even sincere, but also useful. Delphi wasn't just a religious center. It was a diplomatic hub, a public relations machine, and a theater of mystery rolled into one. And at the center of it all, a woman in a trance, perched on a bronze tripod, murmuring verses no one could quite understand, and everyone was desperate to believe. You sit on a stone bench near the base of the old stadium, once used for the Pythian Games, like the Olympics, but holier. You try to imagine the crowd cheering, the runners pounding past olive trees, the victor receiving his crown of laurel, and perhaps a cryptic nod from the priests. Even sporting events were touched by Delphi's strange gravity. Glory here was supposed to echo longer, outlive the dust. And maybe that's the point. Not the prophecy itself. Not the gold, or the monuments, or the gods. Just the echo. You lean back. The valley sprawls before you, blue and green and gold under the fading sun. You think of Croesus and his treasure, Themistocles and his gamble, that Thracian horse in its glittering armor. All of them came here. All of them asked questions. All of them left with answers shaped like riddles and wrapped in silence. You close your eyes for a moment. Let the stillness wash over you. In this light, even the broken columns seem to lean forward, listening. You wander behind the temple again, this time tracing the edge of what lies beneath. You know the Pythia sat above a fissure, or at least, that's what the stories say. But the actual crack in the earth? That vanished with time. For centuries, scholars believed the whole thing was metaphor, an invention. After all, no trace of such a fissure remained. No bubbling gas vents, no mysterious vapors, just rock and silence. And yet, something didn't add up. The descriptions from ancient writers, Plutarch especially, who served as a priest at Delphi himself, kept insisting on this detail. They spoke of a sweet-smelling gas, of a priestess overcome by invisible forces, of a place charged with more than just ritual. Maybe it was exaggeration, but maybe not. You crouch near the earth, brushing your fingers over a section where the stone doesn't quite line up. Modern archaeologists once did the same, though with sensors and drills instead of fingertips. What they found beneath this temple, after so many years of doubt, changed everything. They discovered two fault lines. One ran east to west. The other, more subtle, curved beneath the foundation itself. And where those two faults crossed, scientists detected traces of hydrocarbon gases, specifically ethylene. In small amounts, it's harmless. In just the right concentration, though, it can cause euphoria, dizziness, hallucinations. A kind of dreamlike detachment from reality. Sound familiar? The Pythia didn't need divine intervention. She may have just needed geology. You step carefully along the edge of the Adyton, the chamber where she sat. It's half collapsed now, but you can imagine the setup. The tripod chair, the basin of spring water, the burning laurel. Maybe there was incense too. Maybe a brazier. Whatever the exact recipe, the mixture worked, repeatedly, predictably, for nearly 1,000 years. 1,000 years of trance and riddle. 1,000 years of people leaning forward, waiting to hear what a woman breathing strange vapors would say next. Not every scholar agrees, of course. Some claim the ethylene levels are too low today to prove anything about the past. Others argue that the symptoms don't quite match. And then there's the matter of the actual fissure, partially reconstructed now, but still debated. Was it really wide enough to release gas in useful amounts? Or was the entire setup more symbolic than practical? And yet, a coincidence is hard to ignore. Two fault lines. Hydrocarbons, earthquakes, temple ruins directly above a crack in the crust. If nothing else, the oracle sat in one of the most seismically active places in ancient Greece. That fact alone makes you pause. You picture her seated in the dark. The stone cool beneath her, the air thick with burnt resin. The laurel leaves already bitter on her tongue. The priest stands nearby, waiting. Outside, a king clutches a votive offering. Inside, her head tips slowly forward. Her shoulders twitch. She opens her mouth and begins to speak. It's not a voice she recognizes. It's deeper, older, coming from a place just under her ribs. The words tumble out like water, finding a path downhill. Some make sense. Others don't, but the rhythm is steady. She's done this before. She knows how to let go. The priest listens. Carefully. He won't interrupt. He'll wait until her voice shifts, when it loses the strange edge, the cadence of something otherworldly. Then he'll step in. Ask for clarity, maybe. Reframe the question. But he'll never tell her what to say. That would break the spell. There's a strange intimacy to it. You feel that now, walking the edge of her chamber. The line between illusion and experience blurs here. Even if no gas had ever risen, even if no fault lines cracked below, there's power in repetition, in ritual, in belief. The trance could have come from breath control, from chanting, from the sheer psychological weight of being watched by 1,000 years of prophecy. But let's be honest, some kind of gas certainly helps. You move toward the old spring, the Cassitus, where the Pythia would purify herself before entering the temple. Its waters still trickle faintly, though the path is overgrown. Back in her day, the spring was believed to be sacred. A drink from it could clear the mind or fog it, depending on the ritual. And nearby, a smaller fissure vented the same kind of sweet-scented mist. Plutarch once wrote that the Pythia's inspiration was a divine vapor. He never called it ethylene, of course, but his phrasing suggests more than metaphor. He knew something unusual was happening in that chamber, and he believed it wasn't just performance. One quirky story, almost forgotten now, involves a goat. An early shepherd, they say, noticed one of his animals acting strangely after it wandered near a fissure in the rocks. The goat began to dance. Not just hop or stumble, but move in frantic circles, bleating like it had lost its mind. Curious, the shepherd went to investigate. He inhaled, and he too began to speak in wild, poetic verse. Whether that's the birth of the oracle or just an Aesop-style warning about cave fumes is unclear, but it's oddly specific. You imagine that goat prancing at the edge of myth. Maybe it really did discover something. Or maybe someone needed a convenient origin story, one that would make people believe the divine had touched this place long before humans arrived. And that brings you to the question that no one's quite answered. Did the gases cause prophecy? Or did prophecy cause people to look for gases? It's a chicken and egg dilemma, flipped through a geological lens. The Greeks didn't need scientific proof. They had experience. The Pythia spoke, and events unfolded. That was enough. Only later, long after the oracle fell silent, did people begin to ask how it worked, why it worked, whether it ever worked at all. And here's the thing. No matter how deep you dig, you'll never be sure. Maybe the gases helped. Maybe the rituals did the rest. Maybe it was collective theater at a scale we can't quite replicate today. But as you stand here, beneath the open sky and cracked stones, it feels real, or real enough. You take a breath. Just air. No sweet fumes, no trance. But for a moment, you wish there were. Not to see the future, just to understand how it must have felt. To sit in that chamber, between earth and sky, and let a voice not quite your own drift into the world. Whatever she breathed, whatever she became in those moments, was powerful enough to bend kings, rewrite wars, and keep Delphi alive for centuries. You step back into the light. A soft breeze rises from the valley, carrying the scent of dust and pine. And somewhere beneath your feet, the earth still shifts. You find yourself walking the upper ridge above the sanctuary, where the view opens wide toward the sea in the distance. The air is cooler here, less burdened by stone and incense. It's a good place to think about the times when things didn't work out quite so mystically. For all the reverence surrounding Delphi, not every prophecy stood the test of hindsight. In fact, some of the oracle's pronouncements were followed by spectacular failures, disasters, or deeply ironic outcomes. And yet, that didn't break the spell. Because at Delphi, ambiguity was a feature, not a flaw. If a prophecy turned out badly, you just hadn't interpreted it correctly. Take Croesus again, a famously rich king of Lydia. He asked whether he should attack Persia, and the oracle told him, "If you cross the river, a great empire will fall." Which it did, his own. But technically, she wasn't wrong. Just unhelpfully vague. Another case? The Athenian general Nicias, during the doomed Sicilian expedition. He was a man famous for caution, for triple-checking his omens. Before launching the campaign, he consulted the oracle, hoping for a clear sign. He got one, sort of. The Pythia said it was an auspicious time for sailing, as long as the proper rites were observed. So Nicias delayed, and delayed, and waited for a lunar eclipse. By the time he finally launched, the Sicilian cities were well prepared, and the entire mission unraveled into catastrophe. Thousands of soldiers lost. Athens weakened. Nicias himself killed. But again, the oracle hadn't lied. She just told him what he already wanted to believe. You find a shaded stone bench and sit for a while. The ruins below look almost delicate from this angle, like they could be brushed away with a fingertip. And maybe that's the heart of it. Belief in Delphi was never about precision. It was about possibility. The oracle didn't forecast weather or crops. She translated uncertainty into language. And sometimes, language fails. There's an old Spartan story that proves the point. Before waging war, the Spartans sent envoys to Delphi to ask if they'd be victorious. The oracle replied, "Either Sparta will fall, or a king will die." Naturally, they assumed it meant victory was assured. Their king, Leonidas, marched off with his 300 soldiers. And you know how that ended. But after Thermopylae, no one blamed the oracle. Quite the opposite. They praised her accuracy. A king did die. Leonidas was immortalized. Prophecy preserved its glow. And yet, not every failure was so poetic. One lesser-known tale comes from a small polis in Boeotia. Its leaders asked the oracle whether they should relocate the town due to flooding. She replied that the town would be safe as long as the spring near the Acropolis remained dry. Encouraged, they stayed. The following winter, the spring overflowed for the first time in generations, followed by a massive landslide that buried half the settlement. Was it divine warning? Bad luck? Or a geological pattern nobody had noticed? And then there were the truly bizarre ones. Like the time the oracle told a Thessalian chieftain, "Beware the hornless bull who wears the wreath." He laughed it off, until a soldier wearing a laurel crown and no helmet gored him with a spear shaped like a bull's horn. Not prophecy, just metaphor with timing. You lean your head back and close your eyes. It's hard not to imagine all the people who once sat where you are now, quietly replaying the words they'd been given, wondering what they meant. Some must have left feeling reassured. Others left confused. A few probably left angry. And yet, they came back, because the oracle's power didn't depend on being right. It depended on being believed. And that belief, somehow, endured even through the contradictions. One of the strangest examples came at the very end of Delphi's golden age. A Roman emperor, Julian, known as the Apostate, visited the oracle during his campaign to revive pagan worship. By then, Christianity was spreading fast, and many temples were falling silent. Julian wanted guidance. The Pythia gave him one last cryptic verse. Tell the king, the carven hall has fallen. No longer does Apollo have a roof or a prophetic spring. Silence now. The voice is gone. That was it, the final prophecy. A declaration of Delphi's own end. It's chilling, not just because it's poetic, but because it knew exactly when to stop. The oracle bowed out on her own terms. No scandal, no collapse, just a whisper fading into stillness. And yet even now, scholars debate it. Did that prophecy actually happen? Or was it written later, a kind of historical punctuation mark placed by poets? Maybe there was no final Pythia. Maybe silence came not with verse, but with dust. You stand up again and start walking slowly down the ridge toward the now silent spring. There's a strange comfort in knowing that even divine voices can misfire, that even sacred institutions trip over themselves sometimes. Because in those moments, Delphi becomes more human. It stops being a mystical mouthpiece for gods and starts looking like a theater of people trying desperately to make sense of a chaotic world. They didn't always succeed, but they tried. And maybe that's why the oracle's failures never truly discredited her. Because every failure came dressed in meaning. Every ambiguity left room for hope. You reach the spring again and dip your hand in the water. It's cooler now, shaded by the slope. You think of the Pythia, sitting in her chamber, breath shallow, voice rising. You think of the priests, styluses poised, of generals waiting outside, of kings trembling slightly as they waited to hear their fate. And you realize, maybe the oracle never needed to be correct. She just needed to be heard. The world is quieter now. No lines of supplicants, no marble statues gleaming in sunlight. Just you, the spring, and the echo of questions that were never fully answered. But maybe that's the most sacred thing of all. You linger near the spring, watching the water ripple in the basin. It doesn't shimmer with divine light or bubble with mysterious gases. It just moves, slowly, steadily, as it has for centuries. The silence here feels deliberate, like something sacred once lived in these stones and simply chose to slip away when no one was listening anymore. You step carefully along the crumbled pathway toward the Temple of Apollo. What's left of it, anyway? The columns stand like tired sentinels, half-remembered lines from a poem that no longer rhymes. Once, this temple thundered with oracles, priests, and the shuffle of thousands of sandaled feet. You imagine it as it was, a glinting mosaic floor underfoot, laurel garlands on polished bronze statues, the scent of burning myrrh curling through the columns. People lined up, hearts pounding, questions burning. And in the center, a single woman, veiled and swaying, channeling a god. Now it's only you and the wind. Some historians believe the Pythia's trance came from ethylene gas rising through the fault lines beneath the temple. It's not quite as glamorous as divine inspiration, but maybe more telling. The earth itself once breathed here. The god's voice rose not from heaven, but from beneath your feet. It adds a kind of poetry, or maybe irony. You stop at a carved stone block near the temple's base. Just 3 Greek letters remain, faded but stubborn. They likely belong to a much longer inscription, but time has chipped away all context. Delta Iota Sigma could have been part of Delphi, or Dionysus, or someone's name long forgotten. You run your hand across the surface. It's still cool to the touch, as if it remembers more than it lets on. Above, the theater overlooks the sanctuary. You make the slow climb, passing between olive trees and brittle weeds, poking through stone steps. Once, crowds sat here to hear music, to watch plays, to cheer the winners of the Pythian Games. Poetry was as sacred as prophecy. You find a place near the top and sit. The view stretches beyond the ruins, out toward the Gulf of Corinth. The sea flickers, The air smells faintly of resin and dust. You wonder how many travelers sat exactly here, clutching scraps of parchment, rereading the Pythia's riddles again and again, hoping for some new meaning to float up from the valleys below. Below the theater lies the Tholos, a circular temple that archaeologists still argue about. Its purpose is unknown. Healing center, secret initiation site, something else entirely? You descend again and step inside its broken ring of columns. Even in ruin, it has a grace that feels almost intentional. You stand in the middle and turn slowly. Your footsteps echo faintly. It feels like the kind of place where secrets were whispered, not shouted. The kind of place where a truth wasn't told, but uncovered. Or maybe invented. Even after Delphi lost its voice, it never lost its pull. Pilgrims still came. Not in chariots or state processions, but in ones and twos. A farmer whose crops had failed. A widow unsure of where to bury her husband. A curious child with a head full of myths. Maybe they didn't expect answers anymore. Maybe they just wanted to stand where gods once spoke and feel a little less alone. There's a lesser-known tale about a Byzantine monk who came here in the 10th century. He claimed he saw a shadow moving through the ruins at night, pacing near the temple. It didn't speak. It didn't threaten. It just moved. The monk left Delphi the next morning and never returned. Was it a ghost? A trick of light? Or maybe just the wind remembering how to walk like a god? You pass another pile of stones near the old gymnasium. This is where young men trained their bodies for the games and their minds for the world. They ran, wrestled, debated, performed poetry. You brush dirt from one fallen slab. A faint carving, the outline of a lyre. Music, too, once had its place here. Delphi wasn't just a place of questions. It was a celebration of sound, of bodies in motion, of breath and beat and rhythm. And now, nothing but cicadas and your own footsteps. You stop beneath a tree near the edge of the site and sit once more. The sun has begun to set. The cliffs glow warm gold, fading slowly toward violet. The wind shifts, stirring dry branches. For a moment, you close your eyes and try to imagine the sanctuary alive again. Bronze gleaming, smoke rising, the crowd murmuring. A woman's voice, unsteady, echoing, strange, filling the marble with meaning. And then, gone. There's something comforting about how it all faded. No fire, no conquest, just silence. The gods stopped speaking. The people stopped asking. And the marble held on quietly. That final prophecy, the one some say marked the end, still haunts historians. Tell the king that Carven Hall has fallen. No longer does Apollo have a roof or a prophetic spring. Silence now. The voice is gone. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was invented after the fact. A literary sunset for a fading tradition. But it fits. Too perfectly, perhaps. And here's the strangest thing. Even after all of it, the aura of Delphi persists. You're not the only one who came here hoping to feel something. Even now, people leave coins on the stones. They light candles in hidden corners. They press their palms flat against the columns, as if trying to read what the marble remembers. Because something does remain. Not the voice, not the god, but the echo. It's in the cracked floor tiles. In the way the breeze changes as it slips between broken walls. In the footpaths worn smooth by centuries of feet. You don't need an oracle to know this place mattered. You can feel it. You rise slowly, brushing gravel from your hands. The sanctuary is dim now, touched only by the last light clinging to the cliffs. You take one last glance behind you at the empty temple, the silent spring, the resting stones. And you walk away, not because there's nothing more to learn, but because some places are meant to linger in the mind, not the itinerary. And now our journey shifts. We've spent time with miners, with admirals, with oracles. We've been underground, at sea, and on a sacred mountain. But for our final step tonight, we'll head somewhere a bit less divine, a little more ordinary, and yet just as curious. It's time to stroll through ancient Athens, not as a warrior or a politician, but as a philosopher. Picture a man in a simple cloak, barefoot in the agora, talking to no one and everyone at once. He's got opinions. He's got questions. And he's not afraid to follow a conversation until it collapses in on itself. We're headed there now, to the shaded walkways, the olive groves, the noisy public debates, the strange charm of ideas argued over figs and wine. So shake the sacred dust off your sandals and get ready to think. You wake to the soft clatter of sandals hitting stone and wooden floors, the kind of noise that drifts through open windows like a gentle reminder. The city is already awake, and so should you be. Maybe you're still half dreaming about last night's discussion on justice, or whether the gods actually enjoy olives as much as everyone claims. Whatever it was, it fades quickly, because today, like every other day, has its own rhythms. The sun filters in through narrow wooden shutters, casting stripes across your simple wool tunic. It's early, but the agora's already humming somewhere in the distance, that faint buzz of voices, footsteps, and carts that promise the day will have something to offer, debates, deals, and maybe a little drama. You pull yourself up and head out, the cool morning air brushing your bare legs. Socks? Optional. Actually, frowned upon. The gymnasium isn't the place for socks. It's the place where philosophy begins barefoot, tangled with wrestling, sweat, and sharp words. There's something humbling about grounding yourself literally, feet on stone, mind on edge. It's a tradition older than most people remember, and probably one that would confuse a modern yoga class. The smell hits you next, olive oil mixed with dust, a scent you'll soon associate with sweat and debate, grease and brilliance. You catch it drifting from the gymnasium, already bustling a few streets down. Grunts, shouts, laughter, and the occasional sharp clap echo off stone walls. It's serious business here. Wrestling is a test of strength, yes, but also of quick thinking, strategy, and a kind of physical philosophy. Just as important as the talking. Arguments thrown back and forth as fast as bodies twist on the mat. Both are wrestling in their own ways. You notice the ground is worn smooth in patches. Places where sandals have scraped for decades, where men have paced while turning over arguments, where fists have brushed against forearms in friendly sparring. This gymnasium isn't just for building muscles. It's the town's intellectual coliseum, too. Strength of body and strength of argument share equal stage. It's the place where champions are made, sometimes literally, sometimes with words sharp as spears. Inside, the crowd is a mix of men in various states of tunic and undress, moving with purposeful grace. You spot barefoot philosophers deep in debate, their words measured and sharp as the sunlight cutting through the open roof. Some wrestlers take breaks to quote Homer or discuss the nature of virtue as they wipe olive oil and sweat from their faces. It's a strange mix, half athletic club, half think tank, all noise and energy. The philosophers pace in circles, gesturing wildly, trying to make a point that's always just out of reach. You pick a spot near the edge, where the shade of a fig tree keeps the morning sun from baking your skin too harshly. The tree's broad leaves rustle softly, like whispers from a past long gone, but never forgotten. Beneath it, a tiny lizard darts between roots, pausing to watch you with beady eyes that seem to weigh your philosophical credentials before darting off again. You stretch and shake off sleep, preparing for the day's unique blend of sweat and thought. The air buzzes with anticipation. Every face carries a story, late-night debates, questions too complicated for clear answers, friendships forged in the heat of argument and physical challenge. You're here, like them, ready to wrestle in every sense. One older man catches your eye. His beard is white as mountain snow, his eyes twinkling with mischief and knowledge. You've heard stories. He once debated a group of students for hours without conceding a single point. They say he argued with a mule just to prove a philosophical point. Whether true or not, it fits perfectly into the mood here. Nearby, a younger fellow with a ragged tunic paces back and forth, reciting poetry that he can't quite get right. His words stumble like his sandals. A few sympathetic smiles meet him, and someone throws him a piece of bread. You wonder how many poets have made their first mistakes right here, under these same skies. You look around and catch snippets of conversation. One group debates justice. Is it giving each their due, or something more elusive? Another argues about the immortality of the soul, voices rising and falling like music. A third discusses the best price for fish at the market. Yes, fish prices count as philosophy here. Practical wisdom is the foundation on which grand ideas are built. The gymnasium might be rough around the edges, but it's the beating heart of Athens. Not just a place for bodies, but for ideas. For conversations that begin as whispers and end as revolutions. Maybe today, you'll be part of one. Your fingers itch to join a conversation, but you hold back. Philosophy here is as much about listening as speaking. You watch a group form around a tall man with a quick smile and a sharper tongue. He's holding court, arguing that happiness is the ultimate goal of life. A few scoff, others nod. You feel the pull of the dialogue, like a river pulling you downstream. A young woman walks past, carrying a basket of figs. She doesn't speak much here, but her eyes take everything in. The debates, the wrestlers, the old men lost in thought. You wonder what she thinks of this world of ideas and sweaty competition. Maybe she's got her own thoughts that don't need to be said aloud. You try a few warm-up exercises, twisting your limbs, feeling the morning stiffness melt away. A wrestler nearby challenges you to a match. Not serious, just practice. You grin, accepting. Philosophy might be the sport of minds, but sometimes the body needs its own debate. You wrestle, tumble, and laugh, each throw punctuated by jokes about Socrates' missing sandals or Plato's odd beard. Physicality and wit collide in an age-old dance. The crowd cheers, not just for strength, but for spirit. Later, you catch yourself pacing beneath the olive groves, talking to no one and everyone at once. Ideas fly like leaves in a breeze. Justice, truth, the nature of the good life. The lines between discussion and argument blur. You realize that philosophy isn't just a subject here. It's a way of breathing. As the sun climbs higher, the gymnasium fills with more voices, more energy. You think about the famous philosophers who walked these paths. Socrates, always questioning. Plato, dreaming of ideal forms. Aristotle, cataloging the world. Their shadows stretch across centuries, still present in the dust beneath your feet. You pause under a fig tree and close your eyes. The world softens. The noise fades to a murmur. You feel connected to something larger, an endless conversation stretching back before you and forward beyond your reach. Philosophy here is messy. It's sweaty. It's loud and quiet at the same time, but it's alive. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. You find yourself beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient olive tree, its twisted trunk gnarled and scarred by centuries of sun, wind, and rain. The air is thick with the scent of crushed leaves and dry earth, a faint, almost smoky aroma that clings to the air like a secret. Around you, the light filters through silvery leaves, casting shifting patterns of shadow and sun on the ground and on the faces of those gathered. The olive grove is more than just shade and fruit here. It's a living amphitheater for ideas. Clusters of men, and occasionally women, gather in loose circles, their voices weaving together like a complex tapestry of debate, philosophy, and everyday gossip. The ground beneath their feet is worn smooth, where generations have paced, gestured emphatically, and tossed their words into the dusty air. challenging each other to sharpen thoughts and sharpen tongues. You catch fragments of arguments, each more alive than the last. One group contends that justice is an absolute, a fixed ideal that governs right and wrong like a law written in the stars. Their voices rise in passionate defense of order, fairness, and the idea that every person deserves exactly what is due. Opposite them, others argue that justice is fluid, a matter of balance and circumstance, shaped by human needs, emotions, and the particularities of each case. Their words weave around complexity, contradiction, and the messy reality of human affairs. Neither side backs down, but both speak with a kind of respect, knowing the strength of their opponent's convictions only makes their own more vital. Nearby, a woman leans forward, her sharp eyes reflecting the glint of sunlight. She doesn't merely listen. Her interjections cut through the noise with pointed questions and carefully crafted observations. In a city where women's voices are often relegated to the margins, her presence here speaks volumes. She challenges assumptions with subtlety and wit, her perspective a refreshing contrast that draws nods even from the most stalwart traditionalists. It's a reminder that beneath the olives, the city's discourse is more varied than official records suggest. The children playing nearby dart between the trees, their laughter weaving into the tapestry of conversation like light notes in a symphony. They chase a stray dog, who barks happily before disappearing into the underbrush. Their carefree joy is a sharp counterpoint to the weighty arguments unfolding just a few feet away. You feel the urge to join in, to throw your own voice into the mix, but you hold back for now. This is a time to listen, to absorb the cadence of voices, the clash of ideas, the sharp edges of disagreement, softened by laughter and respect. These conversations aren't mere talk. They're the lifeblood of the city, the unseen currents that carry Athens' democracy forward. You glance around and spot a man pacing slowly, gesturing with his hands as he outlines a complicated argument about the nature of virtue. His words are dense, packed with references to old poets and recent speeches in the assembly. He stops abruptly, looks directly at you, and smiles. A smile that invites you to join, to challenge, to explore. Nearby, a cluster of older men recount stories of past wars and political intrigues. Their voices lower to a conspiratorial whisper, a mixture of nostalgia and warning. They speak of leaders who lost their way, of alliances forged and broken beneath the same olive boughs you now sit beneath. You catch a few names: Pericles, Simon, Alcibiades, and their stories stir images of power, ambition, and tragedy. A young boy approaches, offering a handful of fresh olives and figs as a gift to the speakers. The gesture is simple but profound, a token of respect and participation. The group smiles, accepting the fruit, and the boy beams with pride before running off to join his friends. The olive grove feels timeless, a place where past and present blend seamlessly. It is at once peaceful and charged with energy, quiet enough for reflection, alive enough for heated debate. The rustling leaves seem to carry whispers of long-forgotten arguments, voices of philosophers and politicians who once shaped the fate of Athens here. You think of Socrates, who might have paced these very grounds, challenging the youth and the elders alike to question their assumptions. You imagine him engaging in the same spirited disputes you hear now, his voice rising and falling, his questions never ceasing. The grove is a living monument to such relentless inquiry, a place where ideas take root and grow, challenged and nurtured by every passerby. The scent of the olives mingles with the dust, and the occasional breeze, carrying distant sounds of the agora, the marketplace humming with life and commerce. You stand and stretch, feeling the rough bark beneath your fingers, and the warmth of the sun filtering through the canopy. A sudden shout breaks the murmuring conversations. Two men near the edge have come to a heated agreement, one declaring that the city must resist Persian influence at all costs, the other urging caution and diplomacy. Their words carry the urgency of a city on the brink of change, the stakes of political life laid bare beneath the olive trees. You find yourself drawn into a smaller circle, where a debate about the role of the gods in human affairs has ignited. One speaker argues that the gods are active participants in daily life, rewarding virtue and punishing hubris. Another insists they are distant forces, more allegory than reality, and that human reason must guide policy and behavior. The conversation spirals, voices overlapping, laughter erupting as one man compares the gods to fickle neighbors who gossip and interfere without cause. Another counters with a story of a divine sign that saved a city from destruction, reminding everyone that faith and skepticism often dance together. You feel the afternoon light warm your skin and the dry breeze cool your brow. The grove breathes with life, history, and hope. It is a place of growth, of olives, yes, but also of ideas, of democracy, of the human spirit wrestling with its own nature. As shadows lengthen, you rise and take a slow walk through the grove's winding paths, leaves crunching softly beneath your sandals. You pause once more beneath the ancient trees, their twisted limbs reaching toward the sky like the questions that have stretched across centuries. And you realize this is what Athens is, an endless argument beneath olive trees, a city built on dialogue, on challenge, on voices raised in pursuit of truth. You feel the sun nudge past its peak, pressing warmth across the agora, while your stomach delivers a polite reminder that even philosophers must eat. Vendors' voices rise around you, layering the square with tempting scents. Barley loaves fresh from the oven, figs split open to reveal jewel-bright centers, and small clay bowls of olives swimming in peppery oil. Your feet carry you toward the generous shade of an enormous plane tree whose branches sprawl like a philosopher's questions, wide, tangled, impossible to escape once you step beneath them. You settle on a worn limestone block and open your modest bundle. Crusty bread tough enough to survive a day's walk, a wedge of goat cheese veined with herbs, and glistening olives wrinkled by the sun. A goatskin flask of wine, cut generously with water for clarity of mind, rounds out the spread. Around you, lunchtime unfolds like a civic ritual. Farmers squat on overturned baskets, traders lean against columns, and a knot of youths sits cross-legged in the dust, arguing whether the soul enters the body before or after the first breath. A sudden ripple passes through nearby onlookers, part curiosity, part amusement, and a familiar silhouette ambles into view. The man's robe looks as though it has survived 3 wars and at least 1 philosophical prank. His beard seems determined to debate his face. Yes, Socrates, the native gadfly, drifting toward your tree with that easy confidence earned from equal parts charm and inconvenience. He stops short of your lunch, tilts his head, and raises one shaggy brow. Mind if a poor seeker of wisdom shares your shade? I promise to steal only your ignorance. His grin is weapon and welcome in one. You gesture to the stone beside you. He lowers himself with a small grunt, tears a fragment from your loaf, and without preamble asks, "Tell me, friend, is it hunger or choice that brings us to eat?" You chew on the question and the bread together, answering that sustenance seems necessity, but preference shapes the meal. "Ah," Socrates replies, crumbs nesting in his beard. "So necessity joins hands with preference, much like virtue depends on knowledge. How then do we choose what nourishes the soul?" A circle gathers, drawn by the gravitational pull of his questions. A fishmonger's apprentice, still smelling of brine, offers that stories nourish the soul better than bread. A sandal maker counters that fair wages nourish more reliably. Socrates listens, eyes bright. He poses a new question. If wages are fair, but work is cruel, does the soul starve in secret? Laughter bubbles from the group. Someone passes your flask. Even watered, the wine spreads warmth through your chest. Socrates declines a drink. In moderation lies freedom. He chuckles, then launches into a tale of a miser who hoarded olives, yet died fearful of thieves. Quirky detail. He claims the man locked his storeroom each night, but forgot the roof was open. Ravens feasted while he slept. The crowd roars, half at the moral, half at the image of crafty birds outwitting a crafty man. Conversation tilts toward wealth versus contentment. A silver-haired matron insists property allows generosity. A ragged poet retorts that true giving requires nothing to give. Socrates nods to each, then asks the matron whether generosity performed for status is generosity at all, and asks the poet whether disdain for wealth is secretly envy in disguise. Both fall silent, re-evaluating. You notice the hush, the open question hanging among the leaves. Can any of us know our own motives? Or are we forever guessing at the shadows they cast? As the debate loosens again, he turns to you. Tell me, he says softly, if a man teaches others yet never learns, does he dine or merely watch the feast? You start to reply, but he waves a playful hand. Think on it. Reflection, like olives, benefits from a little time in oil. The midday heat eases as a breeze threads through the branches. Children chase each other between legs, their squeals weaving through philosophy like bright embroidery. One boy trips near Socrates. The philosopher steadies him, asks his name, and asks whether he thinks courage is louder than fear. The boy shrugs, mumbling something about brave warriors. Socrates smiles. Remember, young friend, fear shouts so courage knows where to stand. The boy beams, scampers away, having received a lesson light enough to carry. You return to your cheese, savoring its tang. Socrates observes, goat cheese reminds me. Goats climb cliffs others fear. Would you say wisdom is a goat, scrambling where polite thoughts hesitate? He chuckles at his own metaphor, drawing another wave of laughter. Time stretches. Empty olive pits mark its passage like beads on a string. The crowd shifts as merchants pack up or reposition under fresh shade. A stonemason arrives, wrists thick with dust, complaining that debating philosophers slow deliveries by blocking alleys. Socrates invites him into the circle. Which weighs more, friend? Stone on your back or anger in your chest? The mason grudgingly admits the latter. By conversation's end, he's laughing so hard, he forgets his schedule. A well-known fact slips into discourse when a traveler mentions Sparta's rigid discipline. Socrates asks if discipline without inquiry breeds virtue or merely obedience. Someone recalls that even Spartan kings once consulted Delphi, proving certainty still knelt to questions. That prompts a ripple of respect. The memory of the oracle lingers like laurel smoke. At last the sun tilts westward, softening its glare. Your bread is crumbs, your olives pits, your flask nearly dry. Socrates rises, dusting off his robe. My friends, he announces, I must trouble other corners of the city. Ignorance blooms everywhere this season. A chorus of groans mixes with grins. No one truly minds. He taps your shoulder. Remember, a full stomach may quiet the body, but only a noisy mind wakes the soul. With that, he ambles off, disappearing into the vibrant maze of stalls and porticos. The group disperses slowly, carrying his questions like fresh purchases tucked under arms. You remain a moment, feeling both lighter and fuller, fed by food, yes, but more by the relentless curiosity he leaves behind. As you stand, brushing crumbs from your tunic, you glance at the empty space where Socrates sat. One last question flutters through your thoughts. Will his words outlive his presence, or will they fade like footprints in dust? You tuck that question beside your pocketful of olive pits, a souvenir for the road ahead. You leave the plane tree shade with a belly warm from bread and goat cheese, and a mind still humming with Socratic questions. The agora has shifted in the afternoon heat. Stalls have rearranged, shadows have lengthened, and the tone of conversation feels sharper, more urgent, money time. Where earlier debates floated on the breeze, now business deals clack like thrown dice, and the scent of fresh-cut coins, the tang of bronze dust, hangs in the air alongside roasting meat. Athens is a city that prides itself on equality of voice, but its richest citizens still stride the square like triremes slicing a harbor. Dodging them requires not just nimble feet, but nimble arguments, because every powerful purse comes stitched to someone's grievance. You duck past a merchant counting drachmas into a leather purse, so fat it looks ready to burst. Two attendants flank him, shields of muscle wrapped in crisp tunics. His voice booms about new contracts to supply timber for the navy. Enough planks, he boasts, to floor the Parthenon twice over. He waves a gold signet ring so broadly, it nearly thwacks an old potter arranging cups. You sidestep the gesture and the potter's muttered curse, then slip into a narrow lane between stalls, letting the crowd swallow the merchant's echoing confidence. The lane smells of beeswax and cedar shavings, craftsman's alley. Here, wealth is quieter. Cabinet makers dust curls of wood from their hair. Sandal makers compare calluses. A young sculptor mutters about patrons who ask for heroic statues and balk at heroic prices. You pause at his booth to admire a small marble head, a woman laughing, eyes half closed, hair pinned back by an invisible breeze. "Only 5 drachmas," he says, voice hopeful. You compliment the realism, then move on, because your purse barely jingles and your afternoon's currency is curiosity. Emerging back into sunlight, you catch sight of 2 wealthy cousins in identical white Himatians, arguing near a perfume stall, their faces flush red as pomegranates. You recognize them, descendants of an aristocratic family that once bankrolled a fleet of triremes. Today they're debating inheritance shares. One wants to fund a new theater chorus, the other to refurbish the family's marble courtyard. A third party stands a few paces off, an agent hired to mediate. He massages his temples while trying to keep them from shouting numbers the entire Agra can hear. You skirt the edge of their dispute, careful not to be drafted as an accidental witness. Rich men drag witnesses the way nets drag fish. Just ahead, a hulking Athenian with shoulders like city walls blocks foot traffic. His tunic sports an embroidered owl, a subtle brag that he paid for 1,000 shield covers in last year's campaign. He's recounting that generosity to anyone within earshot, gesturing with a roasted quail skewered on a bronze spike. Every swirl of his skewer sends hot juice spattering. Passers-by flinch, but nod deferentially. You drift wide, but not so obviously that you draw attention, and slip behind a spice seller's awning, inhaling a lungful of coriander to mask the quail smoke. Hungry again, you buy a handful of honeyed almonds for a single obol, and pop them one by one while watching a subtler theater. 3 lean figures in drab cloaks shadow a silk-draped banker. They're not pickpockets, they dress too neatly. More likely litigants gathering rumors for an impending lawsuit. In Athens, it takes as little as a rumor of debt or an ill-timed loan to drag a rich man into court. Wealth makes wide targets and enemies rarely sleep. The banker senses pursuit. He adjusts his belt and ducks beneath a portico, vanishing behind a column. The cloaked trio splits, circling like hounds. You chew another almond, content to remain invisible. Toward the western side of the square, a temporary rostrum has sprung up, a wooden platform for afternoon petitioners. Standing atop it is Themistocles, a nouveau rich shipbuilder with a beard trimmed too sharply to be trusted. He waves scrolls of proposed harbor regulations and rails that pirates threaten trade, that Athens must triple tariffs to fund more patrols. You notice how he slips extra figures into his rhetoric, always rounding tariffs up, never down. A heckler shouts that Themistocles profits from every plank sold. Murmurs ripple through the crowd, but Timarchus's hired applauders clap on cue, drowning dissent in polite thunder. You shuffle past. When wealthy men stage speeches, truth bends like soft metal. Across the way, a poorer voice rises. Myron, a small olive press owner, warns that higher tariffs will strangle family workshops. His speech is shorter, his tunic patched, yet the clarity of his plea cuts through the staged applause. A few citizens cheer him, but none of Timarchus's allies budge. Wealth, you note, rarely yields mid-argument. It yields only to verdicts or to mobs larger than itself. You decide to avoid either outcome and continue weaving through the stalls. At the fountain house, you refill your wineskin beside a weary courier scribbling down debts owed by 3 different estates, each line slanted like hurried footsteps. She confides a quirky detail. One estate pays her to deliver messages, another pays to intercept them. She drinks, sighs, and hurries off. Proof that in Athens even a humble messenger can walk both sides of a coin. By late afternoon, the agora's heat softens into gold. You head toward the Stoa of Zeus, intending to escape the swirl of wealth and grievance, when a slender hand tugs your sleeve. It's the sculptor again, marble dust on his cheek. The cousins need a neutral speaker, he whispers. They heard you conversed with Socrates. They assume you're reasonable. Flattery, you think, but stepping between rich men and their enemies is like sailing narrow straits. You might navigate cleanly or crash on hidden rocks. You follow anyway, curiosity steering your feet. The cousins stand red-faced still, each gripping a money bag so tight the leather squeaks. They demand your opinion. Should inheritance serve civic glory or private comfort? You recall Socrates' earlier challenge. What truly nourishes the soul? You ask each cousin what outcome lets them sleep untroubled. One murmurs, chorus, the other, courtyard, but neither meets your gaze. So you suggest they sponsor the chorus this year and carve the family names into fresh marble at home next year. A compromise of public honor and private pride. They blink, look at each other, and for the first time, their shoulders loosen. Will they honor it? Maybe. Wealth obeys logic only when vanity is appeased. But as they press coins into the sculptor's dusty palm for a celebratory statue, you slip away. Another dispute diffused, for no. The sun dips, vendors latch crates. Perfumes of lavender and cooling stone replace daytime clamor. You breathe easier, knowing the evening's quieter gatherings under the plane trees await, where philosophers plot, not wealth but wisdom, and enemies are fewer. Yet even there, echoes of the ritual drift like distant oar beats on a harbor. In Athens, you've learned, dodging the powerful is equal parts art, timing, and asking the right question before someone richer asks it of you. The agora exhales as the heat drains from the day, and you follow the tide of voices westward toward the broad-armed plane trees that border the square. Stalls are half-shuttered, coin counts drift to murmurs, and even the swaggering magnates you dodged earlier disappear behind polished doorways to tally gains or nurse bruised egos. Evening belongs to thinkers now. Here, beneath a vault of high branches, the last sunlight slants through dusty air and paints everyone in copper, poets rubbing cramped fingers, merchants untangling ledgers from philosophy, wrestlers easing sore shoulders beneath fresh cloaks. A low clay brazier squats at the center of the clearing. Its coals just touch the light. The flame is ceremonial. Warmth isn't the point, yet the tiny orange tongues steady nerves and mark the space as something distinct from the day's brawl of commerce. The circle forms almost without signal. A dozen, then a score, then anyone still curious enough to trade certainty for inquiry. You slide into a gap on the perimeter, knees brushing a smooth root exposed like the rib of an ancient beast. A wiry man named Lyco assumes the role of evening provoker. He looks like a crane in sandals, long neck, sharper nose, eyes bright as flint. Friends, he calls, raising a palm that glows ember red in the firelight. Name one thing, just one, that cannot be doubted. It sounds playful, yet by now you understand the gravity. In Athens, bruises heal. Flawed arguments linger. The first volunteer is a shoemaker, still smelling of tanned leather. Death, he says confidently. All men die. A few nod. But an elderly widow wrapped in indigo counters. Perhaps not the gods, nor the tales of heroes turned to stars. A young skeptic laughs. Stories are not evidence. The widow smiles thinly. Yet if belief shapes action, can you claim stories lack power? The shoemaker scratches his beard. His certainty flutters like a loose sandal strap. Your own mind hums with possibilities, sunrise, taxes, gravity, yet each feels like a rabbit snaffled by hounds once released. So you wait, letting others expose their necks. A spice seller claims markets obey math. If I sell saffron below cost, I lose coin. This is certain. A grain factor replies that storm or war can send prices soaring overnight. What seemed loss one afternoon becomes fortune by dawn. The saffron man waves a pepper-stained hand, protests further, but laughter crests over him like a wave, good-natured yet firm. In this ring, every statement is a clay pot held to the flame. Cracks glow soon enough. As shadows lengthen, the conversation turns to time itself. A stoop-shouldered scribe insists the calendar of Meton, Athens' proud astronomical achievement, is flawless. A teenager who has clearly spent too many nights atop the Knicks counting stars points out that Meton's system drifts by a day every 274 years. The scribe blinks, mutters, and concedes. Even the heavens wobble under scrutiny. The brazier pops. A drift of cypress smoke threads the circle, lending the dusk a faint resin sweetness. Someone produces a wineskin already half empty and sends it round. You sip, watered red, tart yet refreshing, just enough to loosen the tone without numbing it. Lyco raises his hand again. We fail at certainty. Perhaps we can name what we most fear to question. A potter in clay-flecked tunic clears his throat. I fear to doubt the love of my sons, he says quietly. No one laughs. An older farmer nods, confesses he fears to doubt the favor of Demeter, lest his fields go barren. The group absorbs these softer offerings with new tenderness. Doubt is a tool, but some roots, once cut, do not regrow. You decide the moment is right. We fear to doubt memory, you offer. Each of us houses a private city of the past. What happens if its streets rearrange? A hush lingers. A younger woman, her voice hardly above the crackle of coals, adds that Herodotus admits memory can weave error into fact. Yet we cling to the tapestry. The circle hums with discomforted agreement. To lighten the tone, a lyre player shares a quirky observation. He swears the small bronze owls stamped on Athenian coins sometimes squeak at night if left in a clay jar. As though the metal remembers birdsong, the group hoots. Skeptics demand demonstration. None is forthcoming, but the image lingers, ridiculous yet mildly unsettling. What else inanimate might whisper when no one listens? Just then an olive farmer bursts in late, breathing hard. He plunks down a sack of newly picked fruit and blurts, I know one certainty. An unchecked olive weevil will ruin a harvest. Laughter breaks like surf. Someone tosses him a cup of wine for courage. He toasts the grove, then mutters that philosophy is easier when pests respect boundaries. Lyco, never missing an opening, asks if pests possess their own form of certainty. A larval assurance to chew where they will. That thought stumps even the farmer, who finally shrugs and concedes the weevil might be the truest philosopher here tonight. The sky bruises to magenta. The Acropolis crest glows in reflected fire from distant hearths. A cooling breeze slides down from Hymettus carrying time and the faint tongue of beeswax from hillside apiaries. Someone notes that the breeze itself illustrates doubt. Is it guided by divine breath or random eddies of warm and cold air? A retired hoplite answers that after fighting at Delium, he doubts even the gods know every gust. Lyco's voice lowers, nearly lost to the first chirr of cicadas. If certainty escapes us, he asks, does anything remain firm enough to guide action? Silence lengthens. Even the wineskin pauses mid-passing. Your throat tightens. Socrates' afternoon question echoes. How do we choose when knowledge frays? You speak, surprising yourself. Perhaps courage grows in doubt's soil. Acting while knowing we may be wrong, that is the truest test. A few heads nod. A young sculptor murmurs that marble yields only under steady chisel. Uncertainty makes the hand tremble, but courage steadies it. The brazier sinks to glowing embers. Faces blur into silhouettes rimmed by starlight. One star, maybe Venus, flares above the rooftops. The widow who spoke earlier points at it. There, she says softly, is one certainty. The night will always reveal more questions than the day. No one contests her. The circle slowly dissolves, sandals scuff the dust. Farewells float like ash. You linger last, watching embers wink out. Doubt feels less like a void now, more like an open gate. You scoop a fingerful of warm ash, let it sift through your hand, and think? Even certainty burns down to questions. But questions glow long after the fire. Behind you, the city prepares for torches, supper, and softer arguments. Ahead, a faint lamplight beckons from the stoa, where your footsteps will echo beside philosophers old and new. Night belongs to reflection, and to the promise that tomorrow's dawn will find you questioning again. Just as the circle beneath the plane trees will surely reconvene. Night has draped itself over Athens like a cool wool cloak, and a hush settles where daylight's arguments once rang. Down the hill from the dark silhouette of the Acropolis, narrow lanes funnel you toward the small courtyard behind the prison. Oil lamps flicker along the walls, their flames wobbling in the draft, throwing nervous shadows that crawl over stone like question marks looking for sentences. It smells of damp limestone, crushed rosemary underfoot, and most unsettling, an acrid sweetness you cannot name at first. Only when you near the doorway do you recognize the faint, sharp tang of poison hemlock soaking in a shallow clay bowl, prepared for a single irreversible purpose. A half-dozen friends, Crito, Apollodorus, a quiet Phaedo, wait inside, faces drawn in gray in lamplight. You join their circle, sensing the weight of an evening that will not rely on words alone. Socrates sits on a low pallet, ankles chained more out of habit than need. He traces idle patterns on the blanket, expression calm as a slow river. When he looks up, his eyes glide past each companion, each witness, resting briefly on yours as though he expects you to ask the question everyone avoids. Why meet death when escape is possible? He answers without prompting. One must keep agreements, he says softly, voice warm despite the chill. Even if the agreement is unjust, the city's laws are the fabric of our life. Pull one thread and the whole cloak unravels. A well-known fact hovers here. It is 399 BCE, and the city has condemned him for impiety and corrupting youth, charges that worry him less than what abandoning Athens might signal to every mind, still learning how to question. Crito presses him again. There are bribes arranged, a boat waiting at Phaleron, safe houses in Thessaly. Socrates smiles. Would I teach courage only to flee when it is required? Better to face what must be faced. He gestures to the bowl of milky liquid, the hemlock cup, resting on a wooden stool like a reluctant guest. The poisoner, a laborer assigned by the state, stands awkwardly by the door, eyes fixed on the floor. A quirky detail breaks the tension. Before handing over the cup, the poisoner apologizes that the mixture tastes bitter, then admits he left a sprig of honey-soaked fennel nearby because no philosopher should grimace at the last sip. The remark earns a short, soft laugh even from Socrates. Leave it to Athens to season mortality with culinary courtesy. He accepts the cup, swirling its contents thoughtfully. You watch the liquid slide along the clay, and a chill ripples through the group. His final conversation begins, and it is less about dying than about what living has meant. You catch fragments, how the soul resembles a bee searching for true nectar, how knowledge is recollection awakened, how a good life is a balanced melody of justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom. He asks each friend to state, aloud, the virtue they value most. Each answer returns to him like a farewell gift. Crito speaks of loyalty, Apollodorus of love, Phaedo of truth. When the circle reaches you, you offer wonder, the seed from which every question grows. Socrates nods approvingly. The hemlock cools in his hand, but no one urges haste. He speaks of Asclepius's rooster, a small debt he must repay to the healing god, because death, too, is a kind of cure. You wonder how a life of questions ends in such clarity. An open question flutters. If certainty eluded him in daylight, does night's nerness grant him a firmer answer, or merely a steadier acceptance of not knowing? At last, he raises the cup. "Let us be on our way," he murmurs, and drinks without flinching. The room holds its breath. He hands the empty vessel back to the poisoner, who bows and retreats, duty done. Socrates paces a few steps as instructed, to keep the blood moving until numbness climbs. He critiques the flavor, like chewing sour laurel, and thanks the laborers for the honeyed fennel sprig, which he never uses. Minutes pass. His legs stiffen. He lies on the pallet. Chill rises from his feet like slow tide. He describes each stage calmly: numb toes, heavy knees, a spreading cold that feels neither cruel nor kind. When the chill reaches his waist, he covers his face briefly, as though testing darkness, then uncovers it, offering one last lesson in composure. Crito leans close. Socrates whispers final instructions. Pay the debt, raise his sons to seek virtue over praise. Remember that philosophy is rehearsal for this moment, learning how to die by learning how to live. His chest rises, falls, stills. Lamplight flickers once, twice. Silence wraps the courtyard. You feel an odd lightness, grief braided with awe, settling over the gathering like dew. Afterward, the friends file out. Someone snuffs the brazier. Someone folds the blanket. The bowl remains faintly fragrant. You pause at the threshold, recalling his earlier challenge. Acting amid doubt is courage. Outside, Athens hums faintly. Torches bob along streets. Laughter drifts from taverns. Distant hammers strike bronze shields for tomorrow's drills. Life, questioned or not, continues. You step into the cool night and begin walking. Each stone seems to echo a fragment of conversation from the day. Miners' woes, generals' boasts, the oracle's riddles, the merchant's bargains, the silent doubts under olive trees. All threads converge here, at a clay cup emptied in quiet conviction. The road bends toward the city's edge, where a thin breeze carries scents of cooling earth and distant sea. Ahead waits a final, gentle descent, a closing lullaby meant to guide weary listeners into sleep. But first, you breathe once more beneath the star-laced sky. Holding Socrates' last lesson close, questions do not end at nightfall. They simply soften, like embers waiting for dawn. In a moment, we'll let the coals fade entirely, slip past words, and rest in a calm beyond argument. Our final wind down into tomorrow's dream. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the poisoned air of the silver mines to the roar of triremes at Salamis, from whispered riddles at Delphi to twilight arguments beneath the plane trees of Athens, a slow, lantern-lit walk through the layers of ancient Greece. If you're still awake, thanks for staying with me to the very end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the echo of pickaxes and the quiet sip of the hemlock cup, that's perfectly fine too. That's really the whole idea. If you enjoyed this softer, sleep-friendly stroll through history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it was when you pressed play. I love seeing where these late-night journeys reach. For now, let the clink of oar buckets fade, the salt wind on Asian sails go still, and the laurel-scented night settle gently over marble walls. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.